Chapter 62. Beside the coiling dragon stream, young Kai was concentrating on cultivating. Not far from him, there were several Three Suns fruit trees growing healthily. The largest tree had already borne 3 fruits and was about to ripen. The smallest one was just a small sapling that had just broken through the ground. Since the day he returned from the Blood Group's mining area, young Kai had been cultivating here, day and night, forgetting to eat and sleep. Long Zai Tian's unreasonable actions had made him hold back his desire to become stronger. That humiliation, sooner or later, he would take it back with his own 2 hands. After nearly 10 days of bitter cultivation, the tempered body 9th stage had already faintly reached the peak. Seeing that he was about to break through, young Kai felt helpless. He knew that breaking through a large realm required some opportunities, and it was not as easy as breaking through a small realm. Even if the Yuan Qi in his body was enough, he still needed to find the right opportunity to comprehend what he needed to comprehend. Speaking of which, these days of cultivation could be considered smooth sailing. Every day, he did not need to sweep the floor, so he had more time to cultivate. The 3-leaved Chaos Spirit Flower and Dead Jedi Tree Grass had long been used up. Without the suppression of the strange fragrance, the true Yang tactic's circulation speed was significantly faster than before. This made it easier for young Kai to absorb the Yang Qi from heaven and earth. However, the Yang liquid that he had condensed these days was all used to catalyze the 3 Suns fruit seeds. There was not a single drop left in the Dantian. The energy of heaven and earth gathered around him, waiting for young Kai to break through the mysteries of the initial element stage. Then it would pour into his body and cleanse his body. However, sitting cross-legged on the ground, young Kai did not succeed. After a day and a night, young Kai was still stagnant. Although his mood was not anxious, he was unable to break through the shackles that bound him. It was really strange. Deep in the night, under the vast starfield, beside the coiling dragon stream, young Kai suddenly fell into a state of hesitation. His Yuan Qi was slightly disordered, and a painful expression appeared between his brows. Not far away, Xia Ningchang, who was quietly watching young Kai, couldn't help but let out a soft cry of surprise. Although he was quite a distance away, Xia Ningchang could still feel the unusual fluctuation of Yuan Qi. This fluctuation of Yuan Qi contained a cold and evil aura. How could this be? This was clearly a sign that a misfire would become the demon race. He had only broken through from body tempering stage level 9 to the initial element stage, so how could he possibly become the demon race? To put it bluntly, a weak cultivator like young Kai was not qualified to become the demon race even if he wanted to. Only when one's strength was 1 step higher would such a situation occur in the process of cultivation. But now, this kind of thing was really about to happen to young Kai. Xia Ningchang's beautiful eyebrows slightly wrinkled. She couldn't understand. She was here because she found it herself. After all, she had silently observed young Kai for more than 2 years and had long since become a habit. These days, young Kai's sudden disappearance gave birth to a feeling of loneliness for no reason. It was as if she had lost interest in doing anything. After searching everywhere, she finally found him beside the coiling dragon stream. Only then did a big stone fall from her heart. After arriving here, Xia Ningchang knew that young Kai was about to break through. After waiting for an entire day, young Kai actually did not succeed. Now that such a strange thing had happened, how could she not be puzzled? Just as Xia Ningchang was secretly anxious, a pure and rich hot aura suddenly gushed out of young Kai's body. With this aura gushing out, the traces of the misfire that had become the demon race were instantly burned away. Young Kai's Yuan Qi fluctuations immediately stabilized. True Yang energy. Xia Ningchang's small mouth opened slightly, her beautiful eyes filled with surprise. She almost exclaimed, "How can it be so pure?" That hot aura was clearly Yang energy. Many of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples cultivated fire or Yang attribute martial skills and had this kind of hot Yuan Qi in their bodies. However, no matter which disciple it was, they were far from being as pure as young Kai's. This hot aura was not too strong. After all, young Kai's strength was not high, but it was exceptionally clean, without the slightest impurities, like an unpolluted water source. Before she could recover, Xia Ningqiang discovered that Yang Kai had once again fallen into that misfire that had become the demon race. A somewhat evil aura replaced the hot yuan qi and slowly spread out from Yang Kai's body. After a while, another burst of true yang energy erupted, suppressing this evil aura and allowing Yang Kai to recover. This repeated several times, leaving Xia Ningqiang dumbfounded. She had never seen such a bizarre situation occur when a cultivator was breaking through to the initial element realm. Generally speaking, breaking through to the initial element realm was indeed met with some resistance, but after all, this realm was very low and could be broken through with a little effort. However, Yang Kai's current situation was obviously different. The resistance he faced was greater than anyone else, and it was already comparable to the difficulty of breaking through to the next realm. Yang Kai was also suffering unspeakably. Just a moment ago, he had faintly glimpsed a trace of mystery and had already taken one step into the threshold of the initial element realm. However, at this moment, the bones in his body suddenly emitted an evil aura, almost causing him to lose his mind. Fortunately, the true Yang Yuan Qi in his body erupted, waking him up. Now, there were two types of energy fighting in his body. One was the true Yang Yuan Qi that he cultivated, and the other was the evil aura emitted from his bones. They fought endlessly, using his body as a battlefield. Sometimes, the evil aura would gain the upper hand, and then his mind would become somewhat unclear. A sense of excitement and bloodlust surged in his heart, and he could not wait to find someone to kill. This feeling was similar to the excitement one would feel after being injured, but there was something different about it. Although he was excited and bloodthirsty when he was injured in battle, his mind was clear. Sometimes, the true Yang Yuan Qi would gain the upper hand, and his mind would be clear and his body would feel comfortable. The fight was endless, and it seemed like there was no winner or loser. Yang Kai was suffering to death. Xia Ningqiang dashed through High Heaven Pavilion, wearing a tight black suit, showing off her graceful figure without a doubt. Her slender waist and slender legs were enough to cause people to daydream. Her beautiful hair was tied behind her head, and her face was covered with a black cloth. She quickly rushed over to Yang Kai. She watched for a long time, and her heart was really worried for Yang Kai. After thinking it over, she decided to help Yang Kai. Generally speaking, a person should not be disturbed when they were breaking through, but Xia Ningqiang could clearly feel the surging battle intent in Yang Kai's body. It was a battle intent that longed for a baptism of blood. Only a battle could free him from this endless cycle. So Xia Ningqiang first returned to her residence and changed her clothes. Otherwise, she was afraid that he would recognize her. After all, they had met before. Coming and going in a hurry, when she returned to the coiling dragon stream, Yang Kai was still in torment, and his movements seemed to be a bit louder than before. Without the slightest hesitation, Xia Ningqiang directly threw herself at Yang Kai, her beautiful eyes surging with killing intent as she sent out a palm strike. Chapter 63. Since she had already decided to help him, Xia Ningqiang naturally didn't dare to reveal any flaws. She could only force Yang Kai to use all her strength to help him break through. Therefore, Xia Ningqiang used a killing move with the first palm strike. Yang Kai's strength was at the 9th level of the body-tempering realm, while Xia Ningqiang only used the strength of the 3rd level of the initial element realm. Yang Kai, who was at a critical juncture, suddenly felt a sense of danger. He couldn't help but feel a chill all over his body. He couldn't help but feel a sense of crisis. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the sound of a palm strike whistling through the air came from the side. Someone was sneak attacking him. Yang Kai suddenly realized. Instead of being shocked, he was happy. He quickly jumped up from the ground, turned around, and threw a punch. The battle intent in his body was raging. He was worried about how to vent it, but he didn't expect someone to deliver themselves to him. Who was it that wanted to sneak attack him was no longer within the scope of Yang Kai's consideration. Right now, he only wanted to fight to his heart's content. With a bang, the Yuan Qi surged. Yang Kai staggered back a few steps. Xia Ningqiang used the force to do a somersault and steadily landed on the ground. A trace of surprise flashed through her beautiful eyes. Although she had only used the strength of the 3rd level of the initial element realm, she shouldn't have been able to fight evenly with him. She should have been able to suppress him steadily. After exchanging a blow, Yang Kai used the moonlight to clearly see the figure of the attacker. It was a woman, but her face was covered with a black cloth, so he couldn't see her face. "Why is it a little girl?" Yang Kai frowned and muttered with some dissatisfaction. When Xia Ningqiang heard this, she was so angry that she trembled. She clenched her teeth and lightly flew over. The yuan qi in her palm surged, turning into a sky full of palm shadows, and covered Yang Kai's head. What he said just now made her very angry. Yang Kai let out a low roar and unleashed all of his strength. Yuan qi circulated around his fists, and in an instant, he exchanged blows with Xia Ningqiang. Although his opponent was a woman, Yang Kai didn't show any mercy. His opponent's strength was clearly higher than his, and every move she made was a killing technique. He didn't dare to be careless. In the blink of an eye, Yang Kai and Xia Ningqiang were locked in battle, but the situation was obviously not in Yang Kai's favor. His moves were heavy and powerful, and although the lethality was fierce, they were far from Xia Ningqiang's nimble and versatile moves. When Yang Kai made 2 moves, Xia Ningqiang could make 3 moves. Furthermore, Xia Ningqiang's body was light and graceful, and as he moved around, he only played with Yang Kai like a monkey. It could be said that Yang Kai was frustrated at every turn. He could sense that the other party's strength was slightly higher than his, but he would never have thought that the other party was only suppressing his true strength to fight him. Facing such an enemy, it would be strange if he could hit her. Under the black mask, Xia Ningqiang's angry little mouth slowly formed a smile. She thought to herself, "Who told you to talk nonsense? You deserve to be beaten." In just a few moments, Yang Kai's entire body was in pain from the beating. As the familiar pain spread throughout his body, the blood in his body became excited once again, surging like a great river. If one listened carefully, they could even hear the sound of waves slapping against the table. The warmth in his body spread out, and his strength rose steadily. Xia Ningqiang's eyes showed a dignified expression. She found that the yuan qi in this junior brother's body was surging more and more vigorously, and his strength was gradually breaking through the body-tempering realm and reaching the initial element realm. Moreover, it didn't stop there, and was slowly but steadily increasing. The punches that carried the yuan qi became faster and stronger. Xia Ningqiang was faintly unable to bear it. She wanted to increase her strength, but she was somewhat unwilling, so she could only grit her teeth and endure. "Who told you to kill me?" In the midst of the fierce battle, Yang Kai suddenly asked with a gloomy face and a low voice. Xia Ningqiang didn't answer, and tried her best to resolve Yang Kai's moves. After fighting for so long, Kai Yang's strength was actually on par with his own, and he couldn't gain the upper hand at all. Every time he was swept by Kai Yang's fists, he would have to divert some of his attention to neutralize the pure yang qi invading his body. Xia Ningqiang was shocked. She found that she had underestimated the purity of this yang qi. This purity was not something that could be cultivated by ordinary martial arts. Once again, in a head-on confrontation, Yang Kai and Xia Ningqiang's palms crossed, but neither side retreated. Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and stared at the woman in front of him. His gaze fell on her forehead, where there was a faint mark. Yang Kai said, "I found that you look like a senior sister of mine." Xia Ningqiang was resisting the invasion of Yang Kai's yang qi. When she heard this, she was stunned. When did she expose herself? How could she know that it was precisely because of the faint mark on her forehead that Yang Kai would suspect her? Yang Kai remembered that senior sister Xia had a sapphire pendant on her forehead, right where the mark was. Xia Ningqiang nervously blinked her eyes, her long eyelashes trembling incessantly. Laughing out loud, Kai Yang suddenly grabbed her wrist and fiercely pulled her into his embrace. Reaching out, he pulled off her face scarf. At this time, Xia Ningqiang suddenly came back to her senses. She did not want to see her real face. First, she wanted to put pressure on Yang Kai, and second, she was a little embarrassed. After all, what happened last time was too embarrassing. How could she be willing to let him take off her mask now? In a moment of desperation, he could no longer suppress his strength. A ferocious burst of world qi burst out, causing Kai Yang to cry out strangely. He was directly sent flying far away, tumbling several times on the ground. When he got up again, That woman was nowhere to be seen. He did not know where she had run off to. Could it be true? Yang Kai pondered. He had just said it casually, but he did not expect the other party to have such a big reaction. Moreover, that last burst of Yuan Qi made Yang Kai realize that there was a big gap between their strength. If she really wanted to kill him, it would be a piece of cake. Why would she need to fight with him for so long? Whether it was true or not was no longer important. Yang Kai felt that the shackles on his body had been broken after that battle. He quickly sat down cross-legged and carefully felt the energy between heaven and earth. In the next moment, the energy of heaven and earth surged, fiercely pouring into Yang Kai. Yang Kai took a deep breath, and all the pores on his body opened up like a whale sucking in water. He absorbed all the energy of heaven and earth into his body, guiding the enormous power of heaven and earth to circulate in his body, cleansing his body. This was an opportunity that every cultivator would have when they broke through a big realm. As for how much benefit they would get, it would depend on their own efforts. 1,000 feet away, Xia Ningchang panicked as she clutched her chest. She didn't think that Kai Yang would be able to see through her identity. Fortunately, she had helped him break through, so her efforts weren't in vain. While she was panicking, a figure suddenly appeared beside her. An old man wearing simple clothes suddenly appeared. The old man had white hair and a kind appearance. After seeing the other party's face, Xia Ningchang hurriedly said respectfully, "Greetings, Martial Uncle Sect Master." The old man smiled kindly, "You are not a disciple of High Heaven Pavilion, so there is no need to be so polite." Xia Ningchang said softly, "But Sect Master and Master are good friends, so naturally you are my martial uncle." Chapter 64. Seeing that Xia Ningchang was so obedient and sensible, the sect master couldn't help but laugh. "Mengwu Ya is really lucky to have such a good disciple like you." Thinking of his 2 disciples, the sect master let out a long sigh. Xia Ningchang obviously knew about his past. Seeing his gloomy expression, he didn't know how to comfort him and could only remain silent. The sect master silently stretched out his hand to block the sky and pushed towards Yang Kai. In an instant, Xia Ningchang felt that the heaven and earth were separated, as if there was an invisible hand blocking anyone's prying eyes. This brat's breakthrough this time should have caused quite a commotion. It's better to take precautions to avoid being discovered, the sect master explained. Xia Ningchang felt a bit strange. He didn't understand why this sect master, who rarely appeared in front of others, was so attentive to Yang Kai. Although he was puzzled, he didn't dare to ask. The old man and the young man were separated by a distance of 100 feet, watching the situation on Yang Kai's side. The heaven and earth energy entered Yang Kai's body, impacting and tempering every inch of his flesh and skin. Although he couldn't feel the fluctuations of the Yuan Qi, he could see with the naked eye that Yang Kai was within 100 feet of him. It was obvious that the commotion was not small. He had just broken through to the initial element realm. How could this be? Xia Ningchang really couldn't understand. As time passed, Yang Kai's body slowly swelled up like an inflated balloon. His skinny body grew fatter for no reason. This was because too much heaven and earth energy had entered his body. Just as Xia Ningchang was secretly worried about him, his body suddenly shrunk back and returned to its original size. Even with the sect master's method of blocking, Xia Ningchang could still feel the fluctuations of the Yuan Qi that made his heart palpitate. What was even more shocking was that after Yang Kai had completely absorbed the heaven and earth energy, a fiery red energy visible to the naked eye burst out from the coiling dragon stream in front of him. This energy was like a red ribbon that rose from the bottom of the coiling dragon stream and drilled into Yang Kai's pores. Yang Qi. Xia Ningchang understood that Yang Kai's first absorption was of heaven and earth energy, but the second absorption was of Yang essence Qi. Although it was also a type of heaven and earth energy, it was of a single attribute. After the Yang Yuan Qi was completely absorbed by Yang Kai, the commotion over there suddenly subsided. "It's done." The sect leader smiled and removed the restriction on that side with a flick of his finger. His figure flashed and disappeared without a trace. His faint voice sounded in Xia Ningchang's ears, "Say hello to your master for me." "Yes." Xia Ningchang responded respectfully. Then, he had time to check on the results of Yang Kai's breakthrough. With just one glance, Xia Ningqiang was stunned. Second level of the initial element realm. She almost thought that her perception was wrong, so she checked again worriedly. She found that Yang Kai had really reached level 2 of the initial element state. This time, not only did he break through a large realm, but he also broke through a small realm on top of this foundation. Was she dreaming? Xia Ningqiang had a special physique. Since his cultivation until now, he had made rapid progress. However, every time he broke through, it was one step at a time. He had never broken through 2 levels at once. Today, seeing Yang Kai achieve such a feat with his own eyes, how could he not be surprised? Just as he was surprised, Yang Kai, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly muttered to himself, "So that's how it is." As soon as his voice fell, the yuan qi fluctuations on his body became stronger. Third level of the initial element state. Monster. Xia Ningqiang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His confidence was once again hit. After staying in place for another 2 hours to make sure that Yang Kai wouldn't suddenly break through, Xia Ningqiang sighed in relief and quietly left. Yang Kai sat at the edge of the coiling dragon stream all night. He didn't cultivate the true yang tactics, but instead used his heart to feel and comprehend the insights of last night's breakthrough. After last night's breakthrough, 2 kinds of energy poured into his body. One was the power of heaven and earth, but this energy wasn't absorbed into the dantian. Besides a part of it being used to temper his body, the rest was absorbed by his bones. The second was the yang yuan qi absorbed from the bottom of the coiling dragon stream. This had become his own and had already turned into 5 drops of yang liquid, quietly settling in the dantian. After thinking for a whole night, Yang Kai finally figured out a general idea. The unyielding golden skeleton could increase his combat strength when he was injured or felt pain, but this increase in combat strength also required energy to support it. It couldn't be produced for no reason. Thinking about it this way, it wasn't difficult to explain why it could absorb the power of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth was absorbed by it, and when he needed it, it would give back to him. This was the mystery of the unyielding golden skeleton, and also the fundamental reason why it could increase his combat strength. For a long time, Yang Kai thought that he could only absorb yang attribute energy. After all, he cultivated the true yang tactics. Now it seemed that this problem was worth experimenting with. If he could really absorb energy other than the yang attribute, then his cultivation in the future would be much faster. This discovery made Yang Kai somewhat happy. Although the true yang tactics was powerful, after all, it had its limitations. If his guess was correct, then he wouldn't have to worry about his cultivation environment in the future. Letting out a long breath, Yang Kai stood up and carefully felt his body. He had indeed broken through, and unexpectedly broke through to the initial element 3rd stage in one fell swoop. Thinking about the 2 enormous amounts of energy that poured into his body last night, Yang Kai was relieved. When the yuan qi in the body first opened, it was at the initial element stage. Although Yang Kai already had a lot of yuan qi in his body, this breakthrough was still significant. The yuan qi in his body formed a large cycle, connecting the heavens and earth, and the true yang tactics once again sped up. Moreover, after breaking through to this stage, to some extent, it was much easier to cultivate compared to the tempered body stage. Of course, the premise was that you had a good cultivation environment. Walking back from the coiling dragon stream, Yang Kai felt both physically and mentally comfortable. After breaking through to this stage, he now felt that the world was somewhat different, and his eyes and ears were much clearer. Within 50 feet, he could even faintly feel a person's breathing. While walking towards the wooden house, Yang Kai suddenly heard a familiar scream. After pausing and listening for a moment, he couldn't help but laugh. Why was Sassafras being beaten again? But this was inside the sect. If he was beaten, then it should be a challenge. If his skills were not as good as others, then he couldn't blame others. Since there was nothing to do, Yang Kai decided to go and watch the show. Within the High Heaven Pavilion, as long as there was a challenge, anywhere could be a battlefield. The place where Sassafras was beaten was not far from Yang Kai, so after walking a short distance, he arrived. There were quite a few people gathered there. Sweeping his eyes over them, Kai Yang discovered that the people there were divided into 2 groups. They were clearly divided, and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Li Yuntian and Zhao Hu, who he was familiar with, were all there, but their expressions were somewhat angry. They were currently confronting another group of people. The situation was not right. Yang Kai frowned as he saw this. When comparing notes between sect disciples, no matter who won or lost, it would definitely not end up like this. Li Yuntian and the others clearly looked like they were filled with righteous indignation and wanted to fight. Chapter 65. In addition to these two groups of people, there were also many High Heaven Pavilion disciples gathered to watch the show. There were quite a few of them, and they were all pointing at the field. With some doubts, Yang Kai squeezed into the crowd and slowly walked to where Li Yuntian and the others were. Inadvertently glancing at the field, he found that Sassafras's face was bruised and swollen. He was in a very sorry state as he fought with a young man who was not much older than him. The young man's face was calm and composed, and there was not the slightest injury on his body. He had a contemptuous smile on his face as he dealt with Sassafras' attacks while taunting him. Sassafras roared in a low voice and bravely rushed forward, but his attacks were easily dealt with by his opponent. After watching for a moment, Yang Kai's brows slightly wrinkled. He found that something was wrong. It was not that Sassafras' attacks did not hit the young man, but rather that his attacks had no effect on the young man. When his fists landed on the young man's body, the young man did not even frown. On the other hand, if Sassafras was hit, he would definitely suffer some small injuries. The yuan qi fluctuations that burst out from the two's moves were almost the same, which meant that their strength was not much different. How could there be such a difference when they fought? What's going on? Yang Kai patted Li Yuntian's shoulder and asked. Li Yuntian turned around, his expression overjoyed. Brother Yang. With this shout, Zhao Hu and the others also noticed Yang Kai. They all greeted him and turned around to face the opposite group of people. Why is Sassafras not his opponent? Yang Kai asked his doubts. Their strength should be about the same, right? Li Yuntian quickly nodded, his expression resentful. Young Master Su is currently at the initial element second stage, while that person is at the initial element third stage. If it was a fair fight, even if young Master Su is not his opponent, he would not have it easy. But this person is really despicable and shameless. He is actually using a defensive artifact to challenge his fellow disciples. How could young Master Su use his skills? Yang Kai's expression sank. Defensive artifact. Yes. Li Yuntian clenched his teeth and said, he is the Great Elder's grandson. His name is Wei Zhuan. His defensive artifact was bestowed upon him by the Great Elder. Another spoiled brat. Yang Kai faintly understood that there was an elder behind Sassafras, and this Wei Zhuan was the grandson of the Great Elder. Everyone had their own backing, and their status was about the same. Others did not dare to fight Sassafras, but that did not mean that he did not dare to. However, it was a bit too much for disciples of the same sect to wear defensive artifacts while exchanging pointers. First Elder and Second Elder have always been at odds. Even young Master Su and Wei Zhuan don't see eye to eye with each other. This time, he will definitely ruthlessly teach young Master Su a lesson. Li Yuntian was secretly anxious. Yang Kai said, "Oh, so it's just a boring infighting. Brother Yang, please think of a way to save young Master Su. You know his temper, if this continues he will definitely be seriously injured." Li Yuntian pleaded. Yang Kai's expression was indifferent. When disciples of the same sect are exchanging pointers, the weaker will be beaten. Do you think High Heaven Pavilion disciples are afraid of this? But this battle was never fair. Wei Zhuan is relying on the power of his artifact. Yang Kai sneered, this world is never fair. The weak are prey to the strong, and the strong are respected. You should already know this. Li Yuntian was stunned, and was also speechless. When disciples of the same sect were exchanging pointers, they really could not interfere. Although Yang Kai's performance in the past few days was fierce, the sect rules were still there. How could they expect him to save Sassafras like last time? In the arena, Sassafras was already on the verge of collapsing. He did not have much strength left in his moves. Wei Zhuan, on the other hand, laughed loudly and proudly. He patted his chest and said, "Sassafras, don't be polite. Come and hit me. This young master will not move today. If you can hit me until it hurts, then I will admit defeat." Sassafras's eyes were blurred. Both of his fists were stained with blood. Wei Zhuan's defensive artifact not only had the ability to protect him, it also had the ability to reflect Yuan Qi. Every time Sassafras punched, he would have to bear most of the force. This was why both of his fists were injured. Hearing Wei Zhuan's savage words, Sassafras spat out a mouthful of blood and said with disdain, "If you have the guts, then take off that turtle shell of yours. If this young master doesn't beat you until you crawl, then you are not my grandson." Wei Zhuan's expression turned cold. His face suddenly turned sinister and he laughed. "You have guts. You dare to take advantage of me. You will pay the price for your words." Wei Zhuan was clearly enraged. He rushed in front of Sassafras and threw a punch at Sassafras's face. In his weakened state, Sassafras tried to block, but his condition was not as good as his opponent's and he could not block the attack. His face was immediately hit by the fist and swelled up. His body was also turned around. Wei Zhuan's aura was like that of a tiger. He did not stop there. He directly kicked Sassafras to the ground and fiercely punched him with both of his fists. Sassafras tried to resist, but it was to no avail. The artifact that Wei Zhuan was wearing was not small. It was not something that Sassafras could break. "Call me grandpa and this young master will let you go." Wei Zhuan stopped after hitting for a while and threatened. Sassafras looked at him coldly and laughed with disdain. Last time, Sassafras was almost hit in the head by Cheng Xiaofeng, but he did not yield. How could he compromise this time? "I'll let you laugh." Wei Zhuan did not show any mercy. After a few punches, Sassafras lost one of his teeth and blood flowed out of his nostrils. His appearance was too horrible to look at. This Wei Zhuan was even more ruthless than Cheng Xiaofeng. Young Master Su, Li Yuntian and the others could not watch any longer. They quickly stepped forward, but due to the rules of the sect, they could not go forward to rescue Sassafras. Wei Zhuan did not attack again. Instead, he looked at Li Yuntian and the others with a cold smile and said, "You want to save him?" Li Yuntian and the others did not answer. They took deep breaths and their expressions were filled with righteous indignation. "Let me ask you, do you want to save him?" Wei Zhuan slapped Sassafras's face and asked fiercely. Seeing that Sassafras was attacked again, Li Yuntian and the others quickly nodded, afraid that he would attack again. "If you want to, then kneel. Obediently kowtow a few times. If this young master is in a good mood, then I'll let him go today." Wei Zhuan could not deal with Sassafras, so he set his sights on Li Yuntian and the others. After all, these people were Sassafras's subordinates. Humiliating them was the same as humiliating Sassafras. Hearing this, the surrounding people were in an uproar. Li Yuntian and the others' faces were ashen and extremely humiliated. Sassafras struggled to look at Li Yuntian and the others. His eyes were about to crack as he said one word at a time, "Don't listen to him." With a pa sound, Sassafras was slapped again. Li Yuntian and the others were shocked. They knew that if they continued to hesitate, Sassafras would be tortured again. They looked at Wei Zhuan hatefully. Their faces were filled with endless grief as they slowly knelt down. Yang Kai looked at them in astonishment. He did not expect that they would go to such an extent for Sassafras. A man's knees were gold. If they did not have deep feelings for each other, who would be willing to kneel for others? Yang Kai originally thought that Li Yuntian and the others were just following Sassafras around to eat and drink. Now it seems that this was not the case. Wei Zhuan narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed. He looked down at Sassafras and said, "I didn't expect that the dogs you trained were so obedient." Sassafras's eyes were filled with tears of humiliation. Even when he was beaten into a pig's head by Wei Zhuan, he did not shed a single tear. But now, seeing Li Yuntian and the others kneeling on the ground, those two lines of tears could not help but flow. Chapter 66. Looking at Li Yuntian and the others kneeling on the ground, Wei Zhuan's face became even more smug as he laughed out loud, "Just kneeling doesn't show your sincerity. Li Yuntian and the others' faces were ashen as they clenched their teeth and prostrated themselves with their heads on the ground. Their voices carried boundless sorrow. "Brother Wei, please be merciful." Wei Zhuan's eyes narrowed as his smile gradually disappeared. Li Yuntian and the others' sense of righteousness caused him to be moved. "Wei Zhuan." Sassafras swallowed the mouthful of blood into his stomach. "You and I can't exist under the same sky." "That's exactly what I was thinking." Wei Zhuan clasped his hands together and fiercely smashed them towards Sassafras' chest. With a bang, Sassafras spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted from the pain. "Young Master Su!" Li Yuntian and the others roared. They never would have thought that Wei Zhuan would dare to break his promise in front of so many people. "Don't let a single one go," Wei Zhuan fiercely ordered as he stood up from Sassafras' body and kicked him like a dead dog. The group of Sky Tower disciples who were previously confronting Li Yuntian and the others all sneered as they charged forward, blocking Li Yuntian and the others as they issued a challenge. Li Yuntian and the others were furious and didn't know how to vent their anger. Now that the other side had delivered themselves to their doorstep, how could they not accept? This was a brazen group fight, but each side had a fixed opponent. Wei Zhuan sneered as he looked at Li Yuntian and the others and ridiculed, "Who dares to not accept? Beat them to death. If they die, it'll be my fault." He clearly wanted to teach this group of people who followed Sassafras a lesson and let them know the consequences of following the wrong person. Because Yang Kai was close to Li Yuntian and the others, he was also targeted by one of Wei Zhuan's subordinates. This person rushed in front of Yang Kai and reported his name. He didn't even wait for Yang Kai to respond before directly attacking. Yang Kai kicked out with a thunderous force and landed on the person's stomach. The person immediately knelt down. His strength was probably only at the tempered body boundary, so according to the rules, he wasn't qualified to challenge Yang Kai, but since he had asked for it, he couldn't blame anyone else. Flashing through the chaotic battlefield, Yang Kai walked towards Sassafras step by step. Wei Zhuan narrowed his eyes as he sized up Yang Kai. A trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. Wei Zhuan naturally knew how many people Sassafras had and who they were. However, he had never seen Yang Kai before. For a moment, he couldn't figure out the identity of Yang Kai. Yang Kai remained silent. He walked up to Sassafras with a cold face and reached out to check his breathing. He was relieved to find that Sassafras had only fainted. "Who are you?" Wei Zhuan was immediately unhappy. He had a grudge with Sassafras, and this person actually dared to check on Sassafras's injuries in front of him. He clearly didn't put him in his eyes. Yang Kai stood up and quietly looked at Wei Zhuan. "This young master is asking who you are." Wei Zhuan raised his chin and asked in a stern voice. "Trial disciple Yang Kai, please enlighten me." Yang Kai cupped his hands towards Wei Zhuan. This was the etiquette of Sky Tower disciples when they challenged each other. "Yang Kai?" Wei Zhuan was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized, "You are the Yang Kai who has been in the limelight recently? You flatter me, but if there is no one else in the sect called Yang Kai, then I am." What a joke. A trifling trial disciple dares to challenge this young master. "Do you have the qualifications?" Wei Zhuan sneered. According to the sect's rules, as long as the difference in strength between disciples is less than 3 levels, they can challenge each other. This young master is at the initial element boundary 3rd level. "Who do you think you are?" Wei Zhuan said disdainfully. Trial disciples were disciples who had not broken through to the initial element boundary. Since they had not broken through, then they must be more than 3 levels away from him. "I am also at the initial element boundary 3rd level. Yang Kai replied indifferently. A series of bewildered voices rang out. "Impossible. Yang Kai is already at the initial element boundary 3rd level. Didn't they say that it took him 3 years to reach the tempered body 3rd level? Did I say it wrong? Or did I remember it wrong? That's strange. When Yang Kai challenged me, he was only at the tempered body 8th level. How did he reach this level in less than a month?" All kinds of doubts were raised. Wei Zhuan also looked at Yang Kai suspiciously, as if he was wondering if he was telling the truth. Since he had already reached the initial element boundary, why was he still a trial disciple? How could he know that Yang Kai had only broken through last night, and he had directly broken through from the tempered body 9th level to this level? Now I have the qualifications to challenge you, right? Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and asked, a fierce light flashing in his eyes. If you really have the strength, then you do have the qualifications. Wei Zhuan nodded and laughed sinisterly. If you are not afraid of death. Yang Kai said indifferently, I hope you are not afraid of death. Shameless boasting. Wei Zhuan was furious. He thought to himself, I am wearing a defensive artifact. Even a cultivator at the peak of the initial element boundary would not be able to break through my defense. I am in an invincible position. How can you, an initial element boundary 3rd level, win against me? Come, I will let you try punching me. Wei Zhuan waved at Yang Kai arrogantly. How could Yang Kai be polite? He rushed up and directly punched Wei Zhuan in the chest. The burning hot true Yang Yuan Qi poured in. Not only did it not hurt Wei Zhuan, but Yang Kai's body shook and he staggered back a few steps. He looked down and saw that his fist was completely red. It was obvious that he had been injured by his own Yuan Qi. Haha. You overestimate yourself. Wei Zhuan became more and more proud of himself. Before he finished speaking, he was startled again. This was because he discovered that Yang Kai's eyes had suddenly turned red. A fierce wave of Yuan Qi came from his body, bringing with it a boiling heat. His eyes did not have the slightest trace of fear, only excitement. These eyes were like the eyes of a fierce beast. When it saw a prey it was interested in, it was the precursor to a violent attack. For no reason, Wei Zhuan's heart skipped a beat. Yang Kai had already pounced forward with a grin. A drop of yang liquid quietly appeared on his fingertips. With a thought, it transformed into a blood-red blade as thin as a cicada's wing. The blood-red light flashed, followed by a light-piercing sound. Yang Kai and Wei Zhuan's bodies crossed each other. Wei Zhuan only felt a chill in his abdomen. He looked down and his heart sank to the bottom. He screamed, my embroidered cloud chainmail. This embroidered cloud chainmail was a common middle-level defensive artifact. Although its grade was not high, it was very suitable for a cultivator of his level. The Great Elder had obtained it from somewhere and gave it to him. At that time, the Great Elder had clearly said that an initial element cultivator would not be able to break through the defense of this artifact unless they used a powerful martial skill. But now, the artifact that he had placed such high hopes on, had actually been cut open by a mere initial element stage 3rd stage trial disciple in a single round. What kind of weapon did he just use? Could it be that the blood-red weapon was also an artifact? And its grade was even higher than the embroidered cloud chainmail? If it was not, how could it have such an amazing effect? Chapter 67. At this moment, Wei Zhuan was both shocked and distressed. He was shocked that his embroidered cloud chainmail couldn't defend against the opponent's attack. He was distressed that this defensive artifact had been cut open and had completely lost its ability to defend. In his extreme anger, Wei Zhuan turned around and threw himself at Yang Kai, shouting, "You dare break my artifact, I'll kill you." Wei Zhuan was also at the initial element boundary 3rd stage, so when he used his full strength, his strength wouldn't be too bad. But Yang Kai had already killed an initial element boundary 5th stage cultivator when he was in the tempered body stage, so what could a trifling 3rd stage cultivator do? When Wei Zhuan arrived in front of him, the blood-red blade in his hand crisscrossed and slashed a few times. Wei Zhuan's body suddenly froze. His fist was only 3 inches away from Yang Kai, but he couldn't hit him. This was because he could feel a burning sensation in his chest. His eyes trembled as he looked down and saw the blood-red blade in Yang Kai's hand. It was like a snake spitting out its tongue, swallowing and spitting as it pressed against his chest. A defensive artifact, it's not that great. Kai Yang sneered. His eyes swept over Wei Zhuan's close-fitting embroidered cloud chainmail, which had several large cracks. Yang Kai was also surprised. He didn't think that the blade formed from his yang liquid would be this sharp. If he really fought with Wei Zhuan, although he could win, it definitely wouldn't be this easy. He was only relying on the power of the yang liquid. But since the opponent was relying on the embroidered cloud chainmail, why couldn't he use the yang liquid? You dare to hurt me. Wei Zhuan's face trembled as he looked at Yang Kai with a ferocious expression. Even if his life was in Yang Kai's hands, he didn't have the slightest fear. He was the grandson of the first elder. With such a revered status, no one in Sky Tower had the guts to hurt him. Little brat, you don't know, my grandfather is the first elder. If you dare to hurt me, you're dead. Wei Zhuan threatened. Yang Kai remained unmoved. The blood-red blade on his finger became more and more dangerous, and the red light in his eyes became brighter. I wonder if you'll die first, or me. Yang Kai looked at Wei Zhuan with interest. A strange smile appeared on his face as he slowly exerted more force on his fingers. A trace of dark red blood seeped out from Wei Zhuan's chest. Wei Zhuan's face paled and he couldn't help but groan. The moment his body was injured, he felt a hot yuan qi enter his body, burning his flesh painfully. You dare! Wei Zhuan looked at Yang Kai in disbelief. He had never thought that there would actually be someone in High Heaven Pavilion who dared to hurt him. Whether I dare or not, I've already done it. Do you think I dare or not? Yang Kai continued to exert more force. The blade penetrated half an inch, causing blood to flow out. Wei Zhuan's body suddenly trembled. He put on a strong front and said, You're not afraid my grandfather will kill you. Disciples of the sect are only comparing notes. Life and death is their own responsibility. Yang Kai coldly snorted, You're not as good as others. If you die, you can't blame anyone. So what if he's the first elder? Sky Tower doesn't belong to him. Wei Zhuan was frightened. He looked at the crazy fellow disciple in front of him. A chill rose from the bottom of his heart and his whole body turned cold. Just as he was about to open his mouth, Yang Kai suddenly interrupted him. Before you can say the two words admit defeat, I will kill you. You better not think about it. Wei Zhuan's face turned pale. He really did want to admit defeat. When disciples of the same sect were comparing notes, once one side felt that their strength was not enough, they could admit defeat. The other side could not continue to attack. But now, he didn't dare to say those two words. He didn't see any trace of a joking expression in his opponent's eyes. They were extremely serious. What do you want? Wei Zhuan clenched his teeth and asked. Nothing. I just feel that you're not as good as Sassafras. The only reason you could win against him was because of your secret artifact. Yang Kai slowly shook his head. I'm not as good as him. Wei Zhuan was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He roared in a low voice. How am I not as good as him? My strength is higher than his and my background is better than his. How am I not as good as him? Yang Kai tilted his head and sized him up. You don't believe me? Let me show you. After he finished speaking, his fingers suddenly exerted more force. Wei Zhuan couldn't help but let out a low roar. His face turned as white as gold and his body staggered. Yang Kai slowly turned his head and sized up the group of Wei Zhuan's subordinates. Just now, they were fighting to the death with Li Yuntian and the others. But after Wei Zhuan was suppressed, they didn't dare to make any moves. At this moment, they were all staring blankly at Wei Zhuan. You want to save your young master Wei Zhuan? Yang Kai raised his voice and asked. No one dared to answer. Everyone was shocked by Yang Kai's craziness. The people present were all teenagers. When had they ever seen such a cruel scene? If you want to save him, then obediently kneel down and kowtow to me. If I'm in a good mood, I'll spare his life. Yang Kai said coldly. The group of people's faces turned white. These words, weren't these the words that Wei Zhuan had said to Sassafras's subordinates? When Sassafras's subordinates heard these words, they didn't hesitate to kneel on the ground and kowtow to Wei Zhuan. Were they going to follow in their footsteps? There were so many people watching. If they really kneeled down, they would lose all face. How would they have the face to stay in Sky Tower Pavilion in the future? But if they didn't kneel, what would they do if Wei Zhuan blamed them? The group of people had different expressions. Hundreds of thoughts ran through their minds. Some of them couldn't make up their minds. You all want him to die. Yang Kai lightly sighed. The blade on his fingertips moved a bit deeper into Wei Zhuan's body. Wei Zhuan was scared out of his wits. He could clearly feel that if the blade in Yang Kai's hand moved a bit deeper, it would directly pierce his heart. That was a fatal attack. Wei Zhuan didn't want to die. His whole body was drenched in sweat. He shouted at his subordinates, "What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and kneel down. If I die, none of you will live." His subordinates trembled and hurriedly kneeled on the ground. Li Yuntian and the others were overwhelmed with emotions. The anger they had just suffered seemed to have disappeared with this kneel. It was indescribable how carefree they were. Yang Kai turned his head to look at Wei Zhuan and lightly said, "Now do you know the difference between you and sassafras?" When Wei Zhuan heard this, his face froze. Soon after, his expression changed and he resentfully swept his gaze over his subordinates. In order to save Sassafras's life, Li Yuntian and the others were willing to be humiliated. But what about his subordinates? They had no choice but to shout out and threaten them with their lives. Only then did they reluctantly agree to Yang Kai's request. Comparing the two, the difference between Wei Zhuan and Sassafras was obvious. In terms of charisma, Wei Zhuan was indeed not as good as Sassafras. "Are you satisfied now?" Wei Zhuan forcefully raised his spirits and coldly looked at Yang Kai. Yang Kai narrowed his eyes. His expression was uncertain. Wei Zhuan was shocked and said in a trembling voice, "You can't be," but before Yang Kai could answer, a roar came from afar, "Everyone stop." Chapter 68. Just as the voice rang out, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Yang Kai. Without any explanation, this person's palm landed on Yang Kai's shoulder. With an unparalleled strength, Yang Kai let out a groan and was sent flying. "Brother Yang." Li Yuntian and the others turned pale with fright. They hurried forward to support Yang Kai. Yang Kai struggled to get up. He lightly coughed while sizing up the newcomer. He saw a youth standing next to Wei Zhuan. His expression was dark as he stared at him. With one hand supporting the staggering Wei Zhuan, he asked, "Young Master Zhuan, are you all right?" Wei Zhuan resentfully glared at Yang Kai. His body staggered as he shook his head. "I'm fine." "It's good that you're fine. I came late." The youth couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Although his strength was higher than Wei Zhuan's, he was still a subordinate of the first elder. In terms of status, he couldn't compare to Wei Zhuan. "You're not too late." Wei Zhuan sneered and asked in a strange voice, "Brother Cao, as a disciple of the disciplinary hall, you should know the rules of the sect like the back of your hand. Let me ask you, if someone dares to commit murder within the sect, what is the punishment?" Cao Zhengwen's expression turned cold as he firmly said, "Depending on the severity of the case, the light punishment is breaking the hands and feet and expelling the offender from the Sky Tower Pavilion. The heavy punishment is killing the offender on the spot as a warning to others." Wei Zhuan laughed and pointed at Yang Kai. "Just now, this person tried to kill me. Brother Cao, you decide what to do." With someone backing him up, how could Wei Zhuan compromise like before? Cao Zhengwen sternly shouted, "Is this true?" Wei Zhuan sneered, "When Brother Cao came, didn't you see everything?" Cao Zhengwen nodded, "That's right. Just now, this disciple really did hold a weapon against young Master Zhuan's chest. If I didn't stop him in time, young Master Zhuan would have been killed. This person is really daring. He dares to commit such a crime in broad daylight." The two of them sang the same tune and cooperated seamlessly. In a flash, they pinned the crime of murder on Yang Kai. "Bullshit." Li Yuntian roared, "Just now, Brother Yang and Wei Zhuan were only sparring. How could it be as serious as you say? What are you trying to do by distorting the truth?" Cao Zhengwen snorted, "Is it really that simple?" Zhao Hu said, "If you don't believe me, you can ask the brothers who are here to watch the show. We can all testify." Moreover, this matter was started by Wei Zhuang. Brother Yang was only dragged into it. "Someone will testify? Who will testify?" Wei Zhuan tilted his head and sneered as he looked around. Many of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples who had gathered to watch the fun suddenly scattered like birds and beasts, quickly fleeing the scene. They had all heard of the pavilion's elder struggle, so they naturally didn't have the courage to intervene. No matter which side they offended, their future days in High Heaven Pavilion wouldn't be good. When Li Yuntian saw this scene, he couldn't help but grit his teeth in anger, but he still straightened his neck and said, "We participated in the entire process. We know every detail clearly. We are the witnesses." Cao Zhengwen shook his head. "You gathered a crowd to fight, so you are guilty. How can you testify?" "Gathered a crowd to fight?" Zhao Hu jumped up and roared. It was clearly Wei Zhuang who asked his subordinates to challenge us. Where did this come from? Cao Zhengwen, don't think that just because you are a disciplinary disciple you can do whatever you want. High Heaven Pavilion is not for you to decide. How dare you? Cao Zhengwen rebuked. The disciplinary hall represents High Heaven Pavilion's rules. It has always been fair and just. You dare to question the disciplinary hall's authority, your crime is even worse. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Yang Kai waved his hand to stop Li Yuntian and the others from arguing. Looking at Cao Zhengwen, he sneered, "Fair and just. Today I have seen what is called fair and just." Humph. Cao Zhengwen sneered and shouted, "Arrest all of them. After the Elder Council's discussion, they will be dealt with." Su-su. A series of clothes flapping sounds came from all directions. More than 10 disciplinary hall disciples rushed out from all directions. Even the weakest among them was at the initial element boundary 5th stage. How could Li Yuntian and the others be a match for them? In just a few moments, they were all pinned to the ground and restrained. Yang Kai didn't resist because he knew that it would be useless even if he did. Let's wait and see. Wei Zhuang was a petty person who got what he wanted. He walked in front of Yang Kai and sneered at him. "Take them away," Cao Zhengwen ordered. The disciplinary hall disciples took Li Yuntian and the others away. Looking at the unconscious sassafras on the ground, Cao Zhengwen frowned. He didn't care about Yang Kai and Li Yuntian, but Sassafras's identity was special. He didn't have the guts to touch him. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Send junior brother to the second elder." "Yes." Someone answered and picked up Sassafras from the ground and hurriedly left. "Young Master Zhuang, you've suffered," Cao Zhengwen said softly. Wei Zhuang narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. "That Yang Kai, I definitely can't let him go. He humiliated me today. If I don't take revenge, I won't be a man. You should know what to do." Cao Zhengwen hesitated. "Young Master Zhuang, today's matter is a bit big. It will definitely alarm the elders. If we make a move now, I'm afraid it won't be good. Why don't we wait for the elders to make a decision before making a move?" "But I can't take this lying down," Wei Zhuang said with a ferocious expression. "Don't worry, I'll help you teach him a lesson. I'll let him know the consequences of offending you. Don't beat him to death. I want to end him with my own hands." "As you wish." In High Heaven Pavilion's forest prison, Yang Kai and his group were all imprisoned here. The forest prison was dark and damp, the temperature was very cold, and there were rats and mosquitoes everywhere. Waves of nauseating stench rushed in from all directions. The environment was extremely bad. The forest prison was the place where Sky Tower imprisoned disciples who made mistakes. Li Yuntian and the others never thought that they would one day be imprisoned here. Each and every one of them had a bad taste in their mouths. "Brother Yang, this time we've implicated you." Li Yuntian sat next to Yang Kai and softly apologized. Yang Kai smiled. "This isn't your fault. I couldn't help but jump out. I can't bear to see my own family fighting each other." "Fighting each other?" Li Yuntian almost choked. Didn't these words also include us? To put it nicely, it's called fighting each other. To put it bluntly, isn't it fighting each other? Yang Kai chuckled. "That's true. But Brother Yang, don't worry. Young Master Su won't ignore us. We only need to wait here for a few hours and young Master Su will be able to rescue us." Li Yuntian's thoughts were relatively simple. Yang Kai turned his body and assumed a more comfortable position. "Tell me, why is there a rift between the Great Elder and the Second Elder?" Li Yuntian heard this and sighed. "This is related to our sect leader." "Oh, I'd like to hear the details." Li Yuntian said, "Last time, young Master Su also told you about the sect leader's 2 disciples. Ever since the sect leader left the mountain to capture the second disciple and banish him to the coiling dragon stream, Our sect leader rarely appears in front of others. He doesn't even pay attention to the matters of the Sky Tower. These past few years, the Great Elder has been acting as the sect leader. Maybe it's because he's been here for a long time that he's become more ambitious. The Great Elder now truly considers himself the sect leader. The second elder doesn't like this and thinks that the Great Elder often oversteps his boundaries. Over time, there will naturally be friction. Chapter 69. In the current Sky Tower Pavilion, the Great Elder, Fourth Elder and Fifth Elder have allied together. The Great Elder is the leader, while the Second Elder and Third Elder belong to another faction. The former wants to replace the sect leader, while the latter wants to protect the sect leader. It's just that the Great Elder's faction is a bit stronger. The Second Elder and Third Elder have suffered many losses in the past few years. Hearing Li Yun Tian's words, Yang Kai immediately understood. If the elders don't get along, then the younger generation will naturally fight as well. The conflict between Sassafras and Wei Zhuan probably came about because of this. Zhao Hu sneered, "It's just that when the tiger doesn't come out of the mountain, the monkey is the king. If the sect leader really does appear, then who are the Great Elder and the others?" Li Yun Tian stared at Zhao Hu and said, "Don't talk behind our backs. We younger generation disciples shouldn't speak ill of our elders. Even if we don't like their methods." Zhao Hu stuck out his tongue and said softly, "Isn't that what you think too?" Li Yun Tian said, "But I won't say it." In the contribution hall, Xia Ning Chang hurriedly rushed in. Old man Meng looked at her with a smile and said, "Disciple, you've come to see your master again today? Ian, this old man is very happy to see you so filial." Xia Ning Chang anxiously said, "Master, something bad has happened." "What happened?" Meng Wu Yue was a bit puzzled. He had never seen his disciple so flustered before. Xia Ning Chang quickly told him about the conflict between Yang Kai and Wei Zhuan today. After hearing this, Meng Wu Yue's face became gloomy. "You're saying that Yang Kai has already reached the initial element boundary third stage? And he even defeated Wei Zhuan?" "Yes." Xia Ning Chang repeatedly nodded. She thought to herself, "I was the one who helped him break through." It seems that his last fortuitous encounter in the Black Wind Mountain was not small. His cultivation speed is very fast. Meng Wu Yue was slightly surprised. "Master, don't be so emotional. You should quickly think of a way to save him," Xia Ning Chang said anxiously. Hearing this, Meng Wu Yue stared blankly at his disciple. With a strange expression, he asked, "Disciple, why are you so nervous?" Xia Ning Chang was stunned and stammered, "Do I?" "Yes, you are very nervous now." Meng Wu Yue nodded. His disciple was as pure as ice and as pure as jade. No one knew her better than he did. Over the years, it wasn't as if there weren't any outstanding male disciples who had pursued her, but her attitude towards them had always been one of respect and respect. Today, however, she had actually asked for help for someone who was only at the initial element boundary third stage. Obviously, this wasn't normal. Xia Ning Chang said, "I just don't want his path of cultivation to be stifled just as it has begun to take shape." "Are you very familiar with him?" Meng Wu Yue immediately became vigilant. "No, but I've been observing him for 2 years. Master, you also know that I'm on duty in the Dark Hall. I'm responsible for the territory where he lives." Xia Ning Chang told the truth, then begged again, "Master, please think of a way to save him. This time, he has offended the Great Elder. Without the help of an expert, I'm afraid he won't be able to escape this calamity. The Second Elder may not necessarily care about his life or death." "Master, you are that expert." Meng Wu Yue's face was full of enjoyment. Flattery always worked, not to mention it was his own precious disciple who was flattering him. After feeling proud for a while, Meng Wu Yue frowned, "Disciple, this matter is not something Master can intervene in. You see, this is after all High Heaven Pavilion's internal affairs. This old master is just a caretaker. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to intervene." This was the truth. Although he had a good impression of Yang Kai, as an outsider, how could he have the nerve to intervene in High Heaven Pavilion's affairs? Xia Ning Chang didn't answer. She just stared at Meng Wu Yue with a pair of watery eyes. Although there was a veil covering her face, Meng Wu Wei could still see her angry little face. Meng Wu Wei couldn't stand this kind of look, so he immediately put on a bitter face. Hey, my little grandaunt, don't be so stubborn. Even if this old master doesn't intervene, the second elder will definitely make arrangements. This time, young Kai was involved because of sassafras. If the second elder doesn't intervene, how will he win over people's hearts in the future? What if? Xia Ningqiang asked angrily. There shouldn't be any what if. Meng Wu Wei was also a bit uncertain. After all, when the upper echelons fought, sacrificing 1 or 2 disciples was a very common thing. Humph. Xia Ningqiang turned around and sat down on a chair next to him. She said sullenly, Master, if you don't help him, then I won't be able to go to the 9th Yin congregation ground. I'm afraid your disciple's strength will stop there for the rest of his life. Hearing this, Meng Wu Wei turned pale with fright. He ran out from behind the counter and stood in front of Xia Ningqiang. He lowered his posture like he was serving a grandaunt. Where did this come from? Xia Ningqiang turned her head and didn't say anything. Meng Wu Wei quickly turned around and walked in front of Xia Ningqiang again. Tell me, why can't you go there if you don't help him? In any case, if you don't care about his life or death, then you don't need to care about my life or death either. Master, you are such a heartless person. These words were like a sharp arrow that shot straight at Meng Wu Wei's heart. It was like he was struck by lightning. His whole body trembled, and his little heart broke into countless pieces. Grandaunt, my grandaunt, can't we talk nicely? These old bones of mine can't stand you tormenting me like this. Meng Wu Wei bowed again and again. He was extremely humble. How was this the attitude toward a disciple? This was clearly the attitude toward an ancestor. Xia Ningqiang turned her head and stared at Meng Wu Wei. She said softly, he cultivates a yang attribute martial skill, and the yang qi in his body is incomparably pure. Yang attribute yuan qi? Meng Wu Wei's expression was dignified. To what extent is it pure? It's 5 times purer than the person you found last time, Xia Ningqiang replied. You tested it? Meng Wu Wei couldn't wait to confirm. Yes. If that's the case, then nothing can happen to him. Meng Wu Wei suddenly straightened his back. After thinking for a moment, he walked out. When he reached the door, he paused and looked back at Xia Ningqiang. He asked, Disciple, do you dislike him? No. Xia Ningqiang slowly shook her head. Then you like him? It's not that I like him, I just don't dislike him. Xia Ningqiang's face turned red. Good. You know what you have to do if you want to go there, but you have to promise me that you won't be tempted by him. Only then will I go save him. Master, what are you saying? Xia Ningqiang was very embarrassed. I haven't even spoken to him. These words made Xia Ningqiang feel very guilty. She couldn't help but recall the awkwardness of last night. It's not that I want to cut off your love, but this kind of small place is not a place for you. There's no one here that you can fall in love with. Sooner or later, you'll reach a height that no one can reach. At that time, you will live for hundreds of years, or even thousands of years, while the person you love will slowly die of old age in front of you. I don't want you to suffer that kind of pain. Disciple, you have to remember, the peak of martial arts is loneliness, and loneliness. Chapter 70. Meng Wu Wei's words were said with a sigh, as if he was speaking from his heart. Xia Ningqiang could naturally hear the grief in his words. Could it be that Master had experienced this kind of thing? Just as he was about to ask, Meng Wu Wei had already disappeared. At the same time, in Black Wind Trade, in front of the High Heaven Pavilion disciples' wooden house, a sweaty young man hurriedly ran over. Standing in front of the door, he gently knocked and calmed his breathing before softly calling out, Senior Sister Sue. What's the matter? A cold voice came from inside. The voice was very pleasant to hear, but it carried a kind of coldness that repelled people thousands of miles away. The sweat on the young man's body almost condensed into ice. Shivering, he said, Young Master Sassafras has been knocked unconscious. His subordinates have also been arrested by the Law Enforcement Hall and locked up in the forest prison. As soon as his voice fell, The door of the wooden house suddenly opened and a white-clothed Su Yang appeared in front of him. The man quickly retreated 2 steps and lowered his head, not daring to look directly at Su Yang's flawless face. "Speak clearly, what happened?" Su Yang lightly asked, but the whole wooden house was emitting a burst of cold air visible to the naked eye. Cracking sounds could be heard from the ground, the sound of ice forming. The young man quickly made a long story short and told the whole story. After he finished, he waited for a long time, but there was no movement from the other side. He couldn't help but whisper, "Senior Sister Su?" After calling out, there was still no response. The man gathered his courage and quietly looked up, but there was no trace of Su Yang. She had already left at some point. "Oh my God!" The High Heaven Pavilion disciple almost collapsed and fell to the ground. This Senior Sister Su was too cold. In the future, whoever married her would have to sleep under a quilt on a hot day. However, for such a cold and noble person like Senior Sister Su, there was no man in the world who could match up to her, right? No one would have thought that just a small conflict between High Heaven Pavilion's younger generation disciples would cause such a stir and stir up so many heroes. In the High Heaven Pavilion's forest prison, Yang Kai, Li Yuntian, and the others were still imprisoned. It had already been more than an hour since they were captured, but there was still no movement outside. Li Yuntian and the rest were anxious. They didn't know why Sassafras hadn't made a move yet. But on second thought, Sassafras had been knocked unconscious at that time, and he didn't know if he had woken up yet. If he hadn't woken up, there was no way to rescue him. Just as he was worrying, the gate of the forest prison was suddenly opened. Along with the sound of footsteps, a disciple of the law enforcement hall came to the cell where Yang Kai and the others were imprisoned. After opening the door, he shouted, "Who is Yang Kai?" Yang Kai answered in a deep voice, "I am. Come with me." The disciple of the law enforcement hall impolitely ordered, "Someone wants to see you." Yang Kai's face darkened. He sneered, but he wasn't afraid. He walked out. "Brother Yang, don't go out. Wait for young Master Su to come and save us." Li Yuntian was alarmed and pulled on Yang Kai. "Let go." The disciple of the law enforcement hall angrily shouted, "Whoever dares to stop him is an enemy of the law enforcement hall. You know the consequences." Yang Kai said to Li Yuntian, "I'll go take a look." "Don't worry." Li Yuntian helplessly let go and said in a deep voice, "Brother Yang, be careful." "Humph." The disciple of the law enforcement hall sneered, "You overestimate yourself." Walking out of the cell, the disciple locked the gate and then led Yang Kai outside. Not long after, they arrived in front of a room. The disciple opened the door and said with a strange smile, "Please come in." Yang Kai turned his head and looked at him. He also sneered and stepped in. The disciple of the law enforcement hall followed closely behind and closed the door with a bang. Almost as soon as the door was closed, Yang Kai suddenly turned around and slammed his palm on the chest of the disciple who led him in. Burning hot true Yang Yuan Qi poured into the disciple's body. The disciple immediately screamed and was pushed into the wall. He never thought that Yang Kai would dare to attack him. This time, he took the full brunt of Yang Kai's attack and almost couldn't catch his breath. "You have big dog guts." An angry shout came from inside the room. Immediately, 3 or 4 figures danced and pounced on Yang Kai. Yang Kai only had time to block one of the attacks. In the next moment, he was knocked to the ground, followed by a series of punches and kicks. In the chaos, Yang Kai roared. Blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth. The sweet taste of blood made Yang Kai excited. His blood boiled. At this moment, true Yang Yuan Qi was flowing in his meridians at an incredible speed. The burning heat seeped out of his bones and spread throughout his body. Yang Kai's skin became fiery red. This time, the energy coming from his bones seemed to be much stronger than before. Roar! Yang Kai, who was being besieged, suddenly leapt up into the air. While in mid-air, he kicked out with his legs, hitting the heads of 2 law enforcement hall disciples. Accompanied by 2 screams, the 2 stumbled backwards. But before Kai Yang could land on the ground, a person appeared from the side and accurately grabbed his ankle. With a fierce fling, Kai Yang was flung into the wall like a ragged sack. Groaning, his internal organs were all turned upside down. Struggling to get up, Yang Kai wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Under the dim light of the room, he was able to clearly see the situation in the room. This was a sealed secret room. There were 5 disciples of the Law Enforcement Hall. According to the Yuan Qi fluctuations from the fight just now, Yang Kai estimated that their strength was around the initial element boundary. The one who threw him out had a violent Yuan Qi, which was the sign that he had already entered the Qi transformation stage. 1 against 5. Moreover, the gap between their realms was quite large. This battle was destined to be a one-sided battle. But Yang Kai was smiling. In this adversity, Yang Kai's fighting spirit was surging fiercely. You dare to take the initiative to injure others? The Qi transformation stage disciple shouted coldly. Your courage is not small. The other 4 stood behind him, staring coldly at Yang Kai. They had received orders from Cao Zheng when to teach Yang Kai a good lesson, as long as they did not kill him. They did not expect that just as they entered the room, Yang Kai would actually take the initiative to attack, catching them off guard and causing them to lose face. Heh. Yang Kai leaned against the wall with his head slightly lowered. His scarlet eyes looked at the 5 people and said coldly, You want to hit me? Do you think I can't retaliate? The Qi transformation stage disciple's face darkened. He laughed sinisterly, You are quite smart. Since you know what we are thinking, then don't retaliate. Obediently let us beat you up so that young Master Wei Zhuan can vent his anger. If you dare to retaliate, you may lose an arm or a leg. You can try. Yang Kai looked at him coldly. Stubborn fool. Beat him up. Under the order, the 5 people moved out again. Their moves were ruthless, not showing the slightest mercy. With their strength, it was more than enough to deal with Yang Kai one-on-one. Now that the 5 of them were attacking together, it was naturally easy to teach Yang Kai a lesson. To be continued. Chapter 71. The secret room was suddenly thrown into chaos. Angry roars and the sound of punches and kicks were incessant. Occasionally, 1 or 2 groans could be heard, and blood splattered everywhere. As the saying goes, it is difficult for 2 fists to fight 4 hands. Yang Kai's strength was already lacking compared to these people. Now that he was fighting 1 against 5, how could he protect himself? Often, when he fought with others, he would have to endure 4 or 5 attacks. These disciplinary disciples were even more ruthless. Although they wouldn't take Yang Kai's life, after suffering such a beating, anyone would have to lie in bed for at least 1 to 2 months. Stop. After a long while, the Qi transforming stage disciplinary disciple suddenly shouted and quickly jumped out of the ring. Stop fighting. If you continue, you will kill him. The other 4 people also hurriedly retreated. They stared at Yang Kai, who was lying on the ground, with some fear in their eyes. Fuck. One of them covered his cheek. I was slapped by him. My teeth almost fell out. The other man covered his crotch with a look of lingering fear. I almost lost my bloodline. If I didn't dodge fast enough, the first one to lie down would have been me. Even if he avoided his vital parts, he still felt a burning pain in his thigh. Yang Kai struggled to resist the powerful kick. Even now, when he thought about it, he still felt a chill in his heart. The 5 of them looked at each other, all of them stunned, because although they had managed to defeat Kai Yang in this battle, each of them had more or less been left with some scars on their bodies. This discovery shocked the 5 people. The 5 people's faces suddenly became embarrassed. Wasn't this too embarrassing? How could a trial disciple, who was only at the 3rd level of the initial element realm, be so cruel? When they were ganging up on him, they didn't care much about it. Now that they thought about it, they found it inconceivable. Pu. A sound came. The 5 people followed the sound and saw that Yang Kai, who should have been paralyzed on the ground, actually stood up shakily and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flickered between light and darkness, constantly changing. There was a faint red light shining, and a scorching hot feeling rushed toward him, as if a volcano that had been dormant for thousands of years had finally erupted. This Yuan Qi fluctuation. The Qi transformation stage disciple was shocked. Something is wrong. How could this be the Yuan Qi fluctuation of a 3rd stage initial element realm disciple? It was obvious that he had already reached the peak of the initial element stage. If he took another step forward, he would most likely reach the Qi transformation stage. He can still stand up. The person next to him opened his eyes wide and almost bit his own tongue. Even if it was him, if he was beaten up like this, he was afraid that he wouldn't even have the strength to move a finger. How could he stand up? He's here. Another person suddenly screamed. Before he could finish his words, the originally trembling Yang Kai suddenly rushed towards the 5 people like a gust of wind. Halfway through, Yang Kai's fist became fiery red, like a soldering iron that had been fished out from a charcoal fire. The person who shouted used all the Yuan Qi in his body and fiercely exchanged a punch with Yang Kai. Boom! The person flew backwards and hit the wall before falling to the ground. He felt something sweet in his throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. Yang Kai's body slightly paused, but he had already found his second target. Presumptuous. The Qi transformation stage disciple leader was furious. His 5 brothers were fighting against a junior brother. Not only were they unable to defeat him, but they were also counterattacked. If this spread out, what kind of scandal would this be? Where were they supposed to put their faces? In his anger, the Qi transformation stage disciple pushed out his palm and shouted in a deep voice, "Whirling wind force." The room was suddenly filled with a whistling sound. From the palm of this person, a small tornado visible to the naked eye burst out, directly meeting Yang Kai's fist. Catcher! Catcher! A series of cracking sounds were heard. The clothes on Yang Kai's arm seemed to have been cut by countless blades, instantly becoming tattered. His entire arm was also covered with bloodstains. Yang Kai's crimson eyes revealed a shocked expression. His true Yang Yuan Qi moved, fiercely gushing out from his arm, blocking the opponent's martial skill. With a whoosh, a ball of fire exploded in the secret chamber. Yang Kai's true Yang Yuan Qi merged with the Qi transforming stage disciple's whirlwind energy and ignited it. Amidst the flames, Yang Kai's fist flew out and collided with the palm of the Qi transforming stage disciple. Both sides were forced to retreat. What are you waiting for? Beat him up. The Qi transforming stage disciple's palm turned red. He had never thought that the opponent's Yuan Qi would be so strange. Although it did not injure him, he had still suffered some losses. Enraged, he immediately roared. The other 3 disciplinary hall disciples recovered from their shock. They rushed forward and surrounded Yang Kai. Using all of their skills, they began to beat up Yang Kai. The other man, who was the first to be sent flying by Yang Kai, also joined in angrily. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the 4 people gradually stopped. While gasping for breath, they retreated a few feet away from Yang Kai. They were almost an entire room away from him as they vigilantly sized him up. They were really shocked by this junior brother's craziness. The second time they ganged up on him, the results were obvious. Yang Kai's injuries were several times more serious than the previous ones, but the 4 people also paid a different price. He won't get up again, right? One of them covered his mouth and coughed as he softly asked. After coughing, there was a pool of blood in his hand. He shouldn't, he was already beaten to this extent. Another person rubbed his eyes. There was a bruise there and even a big blister, as if he had been scalded by boiling water. The 5 people felt bitter in their hearts. They felt that they had suffered such a big loss because of the terrain. In this small secret room, 5 people against 1 person seemed to have the advantage, but in reality, it was very difficult for them to attack at the same time. But the opponent didn't have so many scruples. There were enemies everywhere, so he could fight as he pleased. If they were in the wilderness and could use all of their strength, why would they be in such an awkward situation? But this junior brother called Yang Kai's strength was really amazing. A normal initial element boundary 3rd level was simply not his opponent. No wonder Wei Zhuan was defeated by him. Just when the 5 people thought that Yang Kai had been beaten to the ground, he unexpectedly moved again. He was extremely weak and battered, but little by little he straightened his body. The Yuan Qi fluctuations emitted from his body not only did not weaken, but also surged. Damn it! The Qi transformation stage disciple cursed. What kind of freak was this junior brother? Why didn't he faint after being beaten like this? Don't come over, if you do, I'll really beat you to death. The person with the bruise on his eye shouted. This was an extremely comical scene. The people who were beating the other person huddled together and shouted for the one who was beaten to not come over. On the contrary, the one who was beaten seemed to be in a daze. His whole body was covered in blood, and he was moving step by step towards the 5 people. Every step he took was heavy, and every step he took was shaky, as if he would fall at any moment, but he still continued to walk forward. If it weren't for the wall behind them, the 5 people would have retreated. To be continued. Chapter 72. A series of gulping sounds could be heard. Brother, what should we do? One of them nervously asked. He was afraid that if they continued to beat this young Kai to death. This is a fucking madman. The Chi transforming stage disciple's eyes slightly trembled as he cursed, I don't care, if he dares to come over then we'll beat him. This time we must knock him out. Okay. The other 4 awkwardly replied. Just as the 5 of them were on high alert, a chill suddenly rose from the bottom of their hearts, causing the temperature of the entire room to drop by a lot. Cracking sounds could be heard from all directions, causing the 5 of them to turn their heads in amazement. They saw that the walls and floor of the room were covered with a thin layer of frost. What's going on? One of them doubtfully asked as he shivered. Bang! The door to the secret room was kicked open by someone. Who is it? The Chi transforming stage law enforcement disciple shouted and turned his head to look. His mouth suddenly opened to the size of a duck's egg and he couldn't close it no matter how hard he tried. Although the temperature of the room had dropped to the point where it was as cold as winter, a thin layer of cold sweat suddenly appeared on this person's forehead. He stared blankly at the woman who appeared at the door and stammered, Su. Senior Sister Su Yang. Senior Sister Su Yang. The other 4 people's faces also changed greatly as they followed his gaze. Sure enough, they saw a beautiful woman with a cold expression and wearing a pure white dress standing there. She was like a pure white snow lotus blooming on a snowy mountain that had never melted since ancient times. She brought a chill with her as she descended to the world. She was so noble, so cold. Wherever her beautiful eyes swept past, the 5 of them felt a sense of inferiority. They all unconsciously lowered their heads. Su Yang had just hurriedly returned from Black Wind trade, so she didn't have time to investigate the situation. She only thought that Sassafras had also been taken into the forest prison. After rushing in, she noticed that there were traces of a battle and immediately came to investigate. After opening the door, what she saw made her heart tremble. There were 6 people in the room. 5 of them were law enforcement disciples. One was at the second stage of the Chi transforming stage, while the other 4 were at the initial element boundary. The last one was covered in blood and his clothes were tattered. He stood there unsteadily, but his eyes were filled with an unyielding will. I've seen this person before. Young Kai. Once, Sassafras had brought him to Black Wind trade. He was the disciple who had defeated Cheng Xiaofeng. Using her divine sense to investigate, Su Yang was even more surprised. She could clearly sense that this young Kai was covered in wounds. Although these wounds weren't life-threatening, with his strength, it was absolutely impossible for him to still be standing. He should have been lying on the ground by now. Just how tenacious was his will to be able to withstand such a heavy blow without collapsing? In just a few moments, Su Yang already knew everything that had happened in this room. For the first time, a nameless fire rose in his heart, which was rarely stirred up. In a flash, Su Yang arrived at Yang Kai's side. Supporting him with one hand, she poured her ice-cold Yuan Qi into his body and controlled his internal and external injuries. Strangely enough, after being stimulated by this ice-cold feeling, Yang Kai's tumbling blood quickly calmed down. His drowsy mind also immediately cleared up. A clear fragrance lingered at the tip of his nose. Yang Kai turned his head to look at Su Yang, who was standing beside him. His ferocious face gradually calmed down. This senior sister wasn't very tall. She was half a head shorter than him, but at this moment, Yang Kai felt a kind of tranquility that he had never felt before. It was as if he was in an empty snowy mountain. There was only a refreshing coolness, and all the noise in the world had disappeared. With her by his side, Yang Kai couldn't help but feel an urge to join hands with her and live in seclusion in the mountains. Who did it? Su Yang's indifferent and cold voice sounded. The 5 people from the disciplinary hall trembled. They looked at each other, then lowered their heads and said, "Everyone did it." In front of Su Yang, it was as if even lying was blasphemy. Her noble and inviolable temperament and majesty made them not dare to lie. Su Yang nodded slightly, "Very good." After saying this, she supported Yang Kai and turned around, leaving the secret room step by step. Only after Su Yang's figure disappeared did the 5 people let out a heavy sigh of relief, feeling as if they had just survived a disaster. But before the 5 people could rejoice, they suddenly felt a chill on their chests. Looking down, they saw that there was a little bit of frost on their chests. Then, this frost quickly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into an ice flower half the size of a palm. With a hooah sound, the 5 ice flowers shattered at the same time. The 5 people groaned and knelt on the ground with pale faces. They only felt that their yuan qi had disappeared along with the explosion of the ice flowers. Moreover, their bodies had also suffered heavy injuries. So strong. Worthy of being the number 1 person of the 3 sect. The Qi transforming stage disciplinary hall disciple's face was pale. He was shivering from the cold, and his face was filled with lingering fear. He didn't see when Su Yang had made her move, but he had unknowingly been hit by her attack. If it wasn't for this senior sister's calm temperament, today's situation wouldn't have been as simple as just a few injuries. With her strength, if she wanted to take their lives, it would be as easy as pinching a conch with her 10 fingers. Outside the secret room, Yang Kai was still staggering forward. Hearing the movement behind him, he turned his head and looked at Su Yang in astonishment. "You made a move on them?" Su Yang blinked her long eyelashes. "Ian. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Yang Kai nodded. "Oh right, bring Li Yuntian and the others out too." "What about Sassafras?" Su Yang asked. "I don't know." Yang Kai slowly shook his head. He wasn't imprisoned. He should have been sent back. Those people wouldn't dare to touch Sassafras. Hearing this, Su Yang let out a sigh of relief. The 2 of them walked into the depths of the forest prison. Not long after, they arrived at the place where Li Yuntian and the others were imprisoned. Seeing Yang Kai and Su Yang appear together, and being so intimate, they were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They even forgot to breathe. Heavens! If I could be so intimate with senior sister Su, I would be willing to be beaten to death. Li Yuntian and the others were so envious that they wanted to die. "Come out." Su Yang waved her hand and broke the lock on the cell door. "Oh!" The group of people unconsciously responded, and then walked out in a daze. More than 10 pairs of eyes kept looking at Yang Kai and Su Yang. No matter how calm Su Yang's temperament was, being stared at like this, her expression became unnatural. "Come, I'll take you out." Su Yang's pretty face was cold as she supported Yang Kai and walked in front. Li Yuntian and the others followed behind. Not long after, the group of people walked out of the forest prison. The bright light shone in, causing everyone to squint their eyes. However, outside the forest prison, nearly 100 disciplinary hall disciples were waiting in formation, surrounding the exit. "What a big lineup!" Yang Kai sneered. "Senior sister, I'm afraid this is used to deal with you, right?" Su Yang didn't answer. She just faintly glanced at the crowd and continued to support Yang Kai as they walked forward. Wherever they passed, no one dared to block them. All the disciplinary hall disciples who blocked the way scattered in fear and took the initiative to open a path. Chapter 73. Pairs of eyes stared at Su Yang and Yang Kai who she was supporting. All kinds of envy and jealousy quickly spread, and a strong sour smell rose up. Before today, they had never seen Su Yang so close to a man. Even the several outstanding core disciples had never received such an honor. Su Yang cultivated the ice heart secret art, and her heart had been sealed in ice for many years. Not to mention seeing her close to other men, it was rare for her to even speak. Every High Heaven Pavilion disciple, regardless of their strength, status, could only be cautious in front of her, lest they offend her. But at this moment, she actually took the initiative to support a young man at the initial element boundary third stage, her jade-like small hand slightly supporting his waist, her icy face slightly blushing, looking very attractive. The person who was usually unreachable, at this moment seemed to be much closer to them. However, the hearts of countless High Heaven Pavilion male disciples were broken. They felt as if the high and mighty goddess in their hearts had been desecrated. And this person who had profaned their goddess was right in front of them, being supported by their goddess, smelling their goddess's fragrance, feeling the softness of their goddess's small hand, and enjoying a treatment that no one else could enjoy. Murderous Chi. Yang Kai's mouth curved into a strange smile, his expression calm as he followed Su Yang forward, giving off the feeling of a fox exploiting a tiger's might. In front of them, a figure flashed. A handsome young man stood in front of Su Yang and Kai Yang. This person looked at Su Yang with a pair of eyes that were filled with tenderness and sweetness, but also concealed a trace of deep jealousy and unhappiness. Su Yang's footsteps paused, and she looked up at the other party. "Get out of the way." As always, a cold voice sounded. Her voice was flat, without the slightest trace of anger, and no one could hear her emotions. The man smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Junior sister, don't make things difficult for brother. Brother is also doing his duty." This person was the second strongest of High Heaven Pavilion's younger generation, Xiehong Chen. "Get out of the way." Su Yang still said the same words, as if she was unwilling to say another word. Xiehong Chen helplessly said, "Junior sister, these people can't leave yet. They have violated the sect's rules. Before the Elder Council makes a decision, no one can take them out of here." "Sect rules?" Yang Kai took a step forward and sneered, "Brother, may I ask, which rule have we violated?" Xiehong Chen looked at him contemptuously and snorted, "Gang fighting, murder, contempt for the law enforcement hall, any one of these is enough to get you expelled from High Heaven Pavilion." "Gang fight?" Su Yang continued, "Who are you fighting with? Since it was a gang fight, there should be opponents, right? Why did the law enforcement hall only arrest one of them? What about the other side?" Xiehong Chen's face stiffened as he was rendered speechless. The other side of the fight was Wei Zhuan and the others, so how could they dare to catch them? "Murder? Then where are the bodies of the people who were killed?" Xiehong Chen smiled bitterly and hurriedly explained, attempted to commit murder, but fortunately, our law enforcement hall stopped them, so there was no big trouble. When sect disciples spar, they are responsible for their own lives. According to what you said, every pair of disciples who spar with each other are attempting to commit murder. Your law enforcement hall has so many people. If you have nothing better to do, why don't you arrest all of High Heaven Pavilion's disciples? Su Yang's expression was indifferent, her tone cold. As for the contempt for the law enforcement hall, if your law enforcement hall is really fair, who would dare to despise it? I'm afraid that the law enforcement hall, which purports to represent the sect's rules, has long been reduced to a tool in the hands of some people in a power struggle. If you destroy your own dignity, you can't blame others for stepping on you. Junior sister. Xiehong Chen's smile was dry, his handsome face showing deep helplessness. Do you have to be so blunt? Right and wrong, you know clearly in your heart. Xiehong Chen's expression was sad as he whispered, "Junior sister, I have treated you with sincerity, why do you make things so difficult for me?" Su Yang lightly said, "If brother's words were heard by junior sister Zhao Fei Shui, I wonder what she would think." Zhao Fei Shui, like Xiehong Chen and Su Yang, was a core disciple of High Heaven Pavilion. However, the relationship between this woman and Xiehong Chen had always been unclear. Xiehong Chen's body trembled as he stared deeply at Su Yang, his face filled with pain and helplessness. Immediately, his eyes turned and stared at Yang Kai, his eyes suddenly filled with resentment. Yang Kai's expression was calm as he stared back at him without fear. "You're called Yang Kai?" Xiehong Chen suppressed the bitterness in his heart and asked. Anyone who saw the woman they liked so intimately supporting another man would not feel good. "What advice does brother have for me? I know this time's matter was caused by you. If it weren't for you, there wouldn't be this trouble. If you don't want to implicate junior sister Su, you should obediently return to your cell and save me the trouble of taking action," Xiehong Chen faintly said. He had no way to persuade Su Yang, nor did he dare to touch her, so he could only find an opening from Yang Kai. Yang Kai smiled. "What are you smiling about?" Xie Hongchen frowned and asked. Yang Kai was now covered in blood and looked quite embarrassed, but he was still smiling. While smiling, he slowly reached out and grabbed Su Yang's jade hand, which was resting on his waist, gently patting it. Turning his head to look at Su Yang, he said sweetly, "I also don't want to implicate senior sister, but senior sister has always treated me with sincerity. I really can't let her down, so I can only let her do as she pleases." Xie Hongchen's face suddenly paled while Su Yang stood in place, her pretty face filled with confusion. Li Yuntian and the others' jaws dropped to the ground as strange gurgling sounds came from their throats, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't say a single word. The surrounding 100 or so disciplinary hall disciples felt as if their hearts had suddenly split open, each one dumbstruck. "Senior sister, what do you say?" Yang Kai seemed to be unaware of the critical situation and sprinkled a handful of salt into the boiling oil. Xie Hongchen nervously looked at Su Yang, afraid that she would give him an answer he didn't want to hear. Su Yang suddenly regained her senses. In all her life, she had never been so frivolous by a man. Her hand was actually held in his palm and caressed as he pleased. That rough hand rubbed against her skin, causing a burst of tingling pain and a bit of warmth. Su Yang was furious. She almost sent Yang Kai flying on the spot, but after thinking about it, she understood what Yang Kai wanted to do. Suppressing the anger in her heart, Su Yang nodded slightly and generously admitted, "Yes." While answering, she sent a stream of dark qi into Yang Kai's meridians. Yang Kai groaned as 2 streams of blood suddenly flowed out from his nostrils. "Why are you bleeding?" Su Yang asked as she took out a white handkerchief and gently wiped Yang Kai's blood. It doesn't matter. Kai Yang felt a chill in his heart, thinking that although this senior sister's temperament was calm and indifferent, in reality, if you crossed her bottom line, she would not hesitate to act ruthlessly. "You." Xie Hongchen was about to go crazy from jealousy. If Su Yang had just admitted it, he wouldn't have believed it, but seeing the scene in front of him made it impossible for him to doubt Su Yang's feelings. When had he ever seen Su Yang treat a man so gently? When had he ever seen Su Yang's hand being held in the palm of a man's hand without any resistance? If she wasn't really willing, with Su Yang's strength, how could this Yang Kai have succeeded? "Junior sister, you are a genius, how could you fancy such a waste?" "Who are you calling a waste?" Yang Kai and Su Yang turned their heads at the same time, their faces cloudy like the night before a storm. Chapter 74. As if they had discussed this beforehand, as if their hearts were connected, Yang Kai and Su Yang unexpectedly shouted out the same sentence, even their tone and demeanor were the same. Xie Hongchen was startled by the roar. Looking at Su Yang in pain, he bitterly said, "How is he not a waste? In terms of status, he is just a trial disciple. In terms of cultivation strength, he is only at the initial element boundary 3rd stage. This kind of person is a waste. Junior sister, why would you like him? You don't need to worry about us." Su Yang was obviously in character. She also wanted to take this opportunity to get rid of Xie Hongchen's entanglement for so many years. She even used such intimate words. "Brother, do you know the saying love at first sight?" Yang Kai looked at Xie Hongchen playfully. "You shut up." Xie Hongchen's expression was ferocious as he roared, "I am talking to junior sister. How can a waste like you interrupt?" Yang Kai's eyes narrowed as he sneered. "A waste will always be a waste." Xie Hongchen's calm and confident demeanor had long been thrown to the back of his mind. Under the influence of jealousy and hatred, his handsome face became twisted and ugly. "When I was your age, I was already at the qi transforming stage. You are only at the initial element 3rd stage, while I am currently at the peak of the separation and reunion boundary. There is a difference of 2 large realms and 6 small realms. How can you compare to me? Brother, please wait and see." Yang Kai didn't say much. Some things couldn't be said. Only by doing it would it have an effect. "Xie Hongchen, I don't want to be entangled with you here. Get out of the way. Thanks to your disciplinary hall, he is seriously injured. I want to treat him." Su Yang coldly shouted. "Today, no one will leave here. Xie Hongchen roared. Looking at Su Yang with pain, his body slightly trembling, he ordered, "Disciplinary hall disciples, listen to my order. If anyone dares to rush out, kill them all. Even if it is your senior sister Su, you must not show mercy." Deep love, deep hatred. At this moment, Xie Hongchen perfectly interpreted the meaning of this sentence. Hua hua hua. The 100 or so law enforcement hall disciples hesitated for a moment before immediately moving, once again surrounding Su Yang's group. "You insist?" Su Yang's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. Xie Hongchen smiled bitterly. "Junior sister, I know I'm not your opponent, but if you want to pass, you'll have to step over brother's dead body." He was willing to sacrifice himself for a righteous cause, attempting to use his courage and selflessness to move Su Yang. Su Yang was so angry that her chest heaved up and down. She wasn't afraid of the law enforcement hall. Her strength was as high as Yuan Qi level 3, which was 3 levels higher than Xie Hongchen's. Once she used the ice heart technique, no one here could stop her. But Yang Kai and Li Yuntian were destined to have a hard time as well. After all, she was only one person. It was impossible for her to protect everyone under her wings. The situation suddenly reached a deadlock. Su Yang didn't dare to lead her people to rush out, and the people from the law enforcement hall didn't take the initiative to attack, only blocking them here. While a group of juniors were making a ruckus here, the elders of High Heaven Pavilion were in another place, arguing with each other. In the Elder Hall, High Heaven Pavilion's Great Elder Wei Shitong, Second Elder Su Xianwu, Third Elder He Bei Shui, Fourth Elder Ju Fei, and Fifth Elder Yu Zizai were all present. The 5 elders sat in 2 rows. On one side was Great Elder Wei Shitong, while Fourth Elder Ju Fei and Fifth Elder Yu Zizai sat below. On the other side was Second Elder Su Xianwu and Third Elder He Bei Shui. This was the current elder faction of High Heaven Pavilion. Wei Zhuan and Sassafras, who had a conflict before, were kneeling side by side on the floor, reporting the events that had happened today. Sassafras spoke first. Every word he said was true. How he was blocked by Wei Zhuan, how he was provoked, how he was humiliated in the battle, no matter how big or small, he didn't have the slightest bit of emotion as he spoke. After the 5 elders finished listening, they didn't say anything. They only waited for Wei Zhuan to repeat himself. But when it came from Wei Zhuan's mouth, it was a bit different. At the beginning, it was no different from what Sassafras said, but after Yang Kai appeared, Wei Zhuan did his best to slander Yang Kai. His tongue flowed like a lotus flower, and with snot and tears, he said that Yang Kai had gone too far. He even used a secret artifact to break through his embroidered cloud chainmail and tried to kill him on the spot. The bitterness in his tone made those who heard feel sad and those who listened cry. Coupled with his exaggerated body language, the scene at that time was magnified 100 times in front of everyone's eyes. Bullshit. Sassafras was furious and couldn't help but curse. It's the truth. Wei Zhuan took advantage of the fact that Sassafras had been knocked unconscious and didn't see the situation at that time, so he insisted. Truth, my ass. You're just a piece of trash who makes trouble out of nothing. You don't even have a draft for lying. All of you shut up. The first elder slammed the chair heavily. Sassafras scolded his daughter-in-law in front of him. How could the first elder not be angry? But although he was angry, it wasn't good for him to teach the younger generation a lesson. The second elder coldly snorted. The first elder said, "The matter has been asked. What do you all think?" Although he asked this, his eyes were fixed on the second elder, Su Xianwu. Naturally, he wanted to ask for his opinion. Su Xianwu said, "What do you mean by what we think? Isn't this matter obvious? Why don't we just let the younger generation deal with the sparring between themselves? Why bother the Council of Elders?" The first elder smiled. The fourth elder, Ju Fei, who had always followed the first elder's lead, said, "Second brother, what you said is wrong. At the beginning, this matter was indeed a competition between the younger generation. But after Yang Kai started the matter, the nature of the matter changed." How did it change? Under the eyes of everyone, he openly challenged Wei Zhuan. He didn't break the sect's rules. Wei Zhuan's own strength was not good enough and he was defeated. Who can he blame? Su Xianwu was angry that his grandson was being humiliated. His tone was naturally not polite. The fourth elder said, if he really only challenged Wei Zhuan and defeated him, it would be understandable. But the truth is that during the battle, he took out a weapon and used it to break Wei Zhuan's embroidered cloud chainmail. The sect's rules say that when disciples fight, they cannot use weapons. That young Kai clearly broke this rule and should be punished. Su Xianwu coldly laughed. Fourth elder, the sect's rules aren't set like this, right? The sect leader hasn't come out for many years. Could it be that someone is so daring as to change the sect's rules? These words had a hidden meaning. The first elder's faction couldn't help but be moved. Wei Shitong said, "Oh? Then second junior brother, tell us, what are the sect's rules?" Su Xianwu coldly laughed. The sect's rules say that when disciples fight, they can't use weapons. They also can't use pills or secret treasures to strengthen themselves. Both sides can only use their own martial arts and their own fists and feet. First brother, this rule, I didn't say anything wrong, right? The first elder's face was cold as he nodded. You didn't say anything wrong. Chapter 75. That's right. Su Xianwu sneered. Why was Wei Zhuan wearing a defensive artifact when he was sparring with Sassafras? Isn't this breaking the rules of the sect? How should we deal with this? He didn't say how to deal with young Kai, but first tied Wei Zhuan together. This made the first elder's expression blank, not knowing how to answer. If Wei Zhuan really used his own ability to beat Sassafras, then Sassafras can only blame himself for not being skilled enough. Now that Wei Zhuan is using a defensive artifact to humiliate my grandson, brother, do you think I'm made of mud? Su Xianwu shouted angrily and slapped the armrest of his chair into pieces. Wei Shitong had no choice but to lower his stance and say, second junior brother, please calm down. Wei Zhuan's defensive artifact was indeed bestowed upon him by me. But I only wanted to give him a bit of protection. Who would have thought that this child would be so bad and use a defensive artifact to spar with others? This is Wei Zhuan's fault. After saying this, he shouted angrily, Wei Zhuan, why haven't you apologized to your junior brother yet? Wei Zhuan was obedient and immediately cupped his fists towards Sassafras. Junior brother, this time it was brother Wei's fault. Brother will apologize to you. Junior brother, please be magnanimous. I hope you won't mind. Me. Sassafras turned his head away and ignored him. But what could Su Xianwu do now that things had come to this? The first elder said again, Wei Zhuan is wrong, but young Kai's mistake is even worse. Using a divine weapon, he almost killed Wei Zhuan. If it weren't for the intervention of the disciplinary hall disciples, Wei Zhuan would have already lost his life. This matter has a bad influence and young Kai must be severely punished as a warning to others. Fourth elder Zhu Fei and fifth elder Yu Zizai nodded in agreement. Second elder sneered, why is it that Wei Zhuan broke the sect's rules and should apologize, but young Kai should be severely punished? Could it be that because Wei Zhuan is brother's grandson, he can enjoy some special privileges? If that's the case, then what prestige does Sky Tower elders have in front of the disciples? Wei Shitong said seriously, second junior brother's words are wrong. Kai Yang's mistakes and Wei Zhuan's mistakes could not be compared. Wei Zhuan only wore a defensive artifact to protect himself, not to harm others. On the other hand, Kai Yang's artifact was used to kill people. Which one is more important? Second junior brother should be able to clearly distinguish. Su Xianwu asked. Brother who saw young Kai a. Xianwu. Brother, if he really had such a weapon, why didn't the law enforcement hall find it on him? Fourth brother, did the law enforcement hall under your command report on this? The disciplinary hall was under the jurisdiction of the fourth elder, Zhu Fei. Hearing this, he shook his head and said, although he didn't, there were so many people present at that time. They all saw with their own eyes that Kai Yang had a blood-red knife in his hand. If it wasn't for the power of that weapon, Wei Zhuan's embroidered cloud chainmail would not have been destroyed. Su Xianwu snorted. The yuan qi in his body revolved, and a long thin sword suddenly burst out from his fingertips. This long sword was formed by the yuan qi. It flickered. Obviously, It was very powerful. If that's the case, does that mean I'm also holding a weapon? Su Xianwu looked coldly at the three people in front of him. This is only the use of Yuan Qi. How can it be considered a weapon? Fifth elder Yu Zizai slowly shook his head. Second brother, are you saying that Yang Kai, who is only at initial element level 3, can use Yuan Qi to such an extent? Fourth elder Ju Fei looked at Su Xianwu with a smile. This was a joke. A cultivator could only use Yuan Qi when his strength reached the level of Yuan Qi. Only when the Yuan Qi in his body transformed into Yuan Qi could he condense such a substance. As for Kai Yang, he was just a trivial initial element third stage cultivator. The gap between him and the true element boundary was like heaven and earth. How could he have such ability? I didn't say that he could control Yuan Qi to such an extent. But brothers, did you forget about martial arts? Su Xianwu snorted. Impossible. Even if he used some special martial arts, a mere initial element level 3 cultivator would never be able to break through the defense of the embroidered cloud chainmail. Wei Shitong shook his head repeatedly. There is nothing impossible in this world. I can only say that brothers have been in Sky Tower for a long time and are obsessed with fighting for power. Your thinking is too rigid and can't keep up with the times. These words were a bit unpleasant to hear. Wei Shitong's face suddenly turned cold. Second junior brother, do you have to protect that Yang Kai? So what if I do? Su Xianwu suddenly stood up. This matter, to put it simply, is a competition between the younger generation. Why do you have to make a fuss about it? Fine, I'll satisfy your unreasonable demands. You can either punish both Yang Kai and Wei Zhuang. They both broke the rules of the Sky Tower. Don't let either one of them go. Or, this matter is over. No. Wei Shitong flatly refused. Even if it is as you said, that Yang Kai used martial arts to break through the defense of the embroidered cloud chainmail, this person is still young and his methods are bloody and cruel. In the future, when his cultivation reaches a certain level, he will definitely fall into the evil path. Our Sky Tower cannot tolerate such a person. He is only at the initial element level. How do you know that he will fall into the evil path in the future? Big brother, do you have the ability to predict the future? Second brother. Fourth elder Ju Fei was about to speak, but was interrupted by Su Xianwu's angry shout. Su Xianwu pointed at his nose and scolded, Fourth elder, before the head went into seclusion, he appointed you to be in charge of the law enforcement hall. In these past few years, have you seen what the law enforcement hall has done? Where is fairness and justice? If the law enforcement hall only suppresses dissidents and helps people fight for power, then what is the use of keeping it? Tomorrow, I will report to the head and have him remove the law enforcement hall. Fuck, what is this? The fourth elder was scolded, but he couldn't refute, so his heart was filled with grievances. Second junior brother, what if I insist on expelling Yang Kai from Sky Tower? Wei Shitong asked coldly. You dare? Su Xianwu did not back down. Good, then we will follow the rules set by the head and vote by a show of hands. Once the elder council passes, I think second junior brother won't have any objections, right? Haha, a show of hands. Su Xianwu laughed. Big brother, do you think I, Su Xianwu, am a fool? A show of hands, is there even a need to vote? This won't do, that won't do, what do you want? Do you not even put the rules set by the head in your eyes? Wei Shitong also became angry. The elder hall was filled with smoke, and it looked like a fight was about to break out. Calm down, come drink a cup of water, everyone calm down. The third elder, who had not spoken until now, tried to persuade them. The third elder had a calm temperament, and although he stood on the second elder's side, he generally did not participate in any fights. Moreover, his name was the same as his catchphrase, he chue shui, drink a cup of water. Whenever there was any friction between the elders, he would try to persuade them, but the results were very little. We won't drink. The great elder and second elder roared at the same time, glaring at each other, neither willing to accept the other. The third elder was helpless and could only drink by himself. While the elders were arguing, a person's voice suddenly came from outside the door. This disciple has something important to report to the several elders. The fourth elder frowned and quickly said, "Come in." When the elder council was discussing something, ordinary disciples did not dare to disturb them. For someone to come in at this time, it meant that something big had happened in the sect. The several elders knew the situation, so naturally they stopped arguing. After the disciple came in, the fourth elder Ju Fei asked, "What happened?" Reporting to the elders, someone broke into the law enforcement hall's forest prison and rescued the troublemakers Yang Kai and Li Yun Tian. At the moment, they are confronting brother Xiehong Chen at the entrance of the prison. What? The fourth elder stood up on the spot, and the other elders were even more shocked. Who is so bold, daring to break into the forest prison to rescue people? The High Heaven Pavilion disciple did not dare answer, only raising his eyes to look at Su Xianwu. Su Xianwu's heart skipped a beat, faintly having a bad premonition. The great elder took in all of this and more or less had a guess, so he calmly ordered, "Speak." It's Su Yang, senior sister Su." As soon as these words came out, the smile on the great elder's face suddenly became meaningful, and even the fourth and fifth elders gave Su Xianwu a strange look, while the third elder continued to drink his water. Su Xianwu's expression changed, gnashing his teeth in anger as he shouted, "Did you see clearly? Was the person who broke into the forest prison really Su Yang?" The disciplinary hall disciple trembled in fear and quickly said, "Disciple saw it clearly. I have heard of senior sister Su Yang's name. If second elder does not believe me, you can go and see for yourself." "No need." Su Xianwu waved his hand and closed his eyes. A moment later, he really did feel a cold chill coming from the forest prison, a chill that no one else in High Heaven Pavilion could feel except for Su Yang. This little girl really doesn't know what's important, she's too bold. Second junior brother, what do you think of this matter? The great elder smiled as he sipped his tea, waiting for Su Xianwu to withdraw his divine sense before calmly asking this question. At this moment, the great elder was confident. If the two sides were unwilling to back down just now, then there was now a breakthrough. What kind of place was the forest prison? It was an important place where High Heaven Pavilion imprisoned disciples who had committed crimes. Whether Yang Kai was in the wrong or not, as long as he was imprisoned, he had to stay there before the matter was settled. But now, Su Yang had rushed in and pulled him out. She had shown a moment of bravery, but had violated High Heaven Pavilion's rules. This was a big mistake. If this matter was not handled properly, even Su Yang would be punished. Wei Shitong knew that Su Xianwu would definitely not let Su Yang be implicated, so he had to make a concession. Naturally, the one he had to let go was the disciple named Yang Kai. Speaking of which, none of the five elders knew who Kai Yang was. The main reason why they had made such a big fuss about him was because they wanted to seize control of the High Heaven Pavilion. But now, the great elder felt that he could win. After this matter spread out, the disciples below would naturally think that the great elder's faction could influence High Heaven Pavilion's decisions and movements, thus achieving their goal. Su Xianwu's face was livid as he struggled for a long time before angrily saying, "Whatever eldest brother wants to do, we'll do as he pleases." Su Yang had become a hindrance, so how could Su Xianwu continue to play with them? In order to protect Su Yang from being punished, Yang Kai could only sacrifice himself. Where there is life, there is hope. There will always be a chance to get back at him in the future. Old ghost. When Sassafras heard this, he immediately stared at Su Xianwu in disbelief. "What did you call me?" Su Xianwu was about to go crazy with anger towards this pair of siblings. "Grandfather, you can't do this." Sassafras quickly changed his words. "You have no right to speak in this matter." Su Xianwu glared at him fiercely. "Brother Yang saved my life, you can't just ignore him. If you don't, then you are ungrateful. You shut up." Su Xianwu's face turned red. Although he was unwilling in his heart, he was now a fish on the chopping block, so what could he do? In order to prevent Sassafras from continuing, Su Xianwu sent out a finger, causing Sassafras to freeze like a statue, unable to speak or move, only able to watch and listen. "I'll deal with you when we get back." Su Xianwu snorted. "Ha ha." The great elder smiled with satisfaction, Since second junior brother has no objections, then this matter is decided. Saying so, he looked at the disciples below and said, "Pass down the order. Trial disciple Yang Kai has repeatedly violated the sect's rules. His methods are bloody and cruel, so the disciplinary hall will arrest him and bring him back to the forest prison. After the elders have a discussion, we will deal with him. As for Su Yang, since she is young and ignorant, and this is her first offense, we will not pursue this matter. Junior brothers, what do you think? How could the other elders have any objections? Go." The great elder waved his hand and a token flew out, landing in the disciple's hand. The elder's command, seeing the token, is the same as seeing the person. With this token, Su Yang did not dare to act rashly. Yes. The disciplinary hall disciple received the order and quickly left. A moment later, a short scream suddenly came from the door, followed by the sound of a body falling to the ground. The elders' expressions changed, and just as they were about to get up to investigate, a voice came from outside. "Elders, you are quite awe-inspiring." The voice sounded, and a white-haired old man slowly walked in. In his hand was the disciplinary hall disciple who had just left, but now he had been knocked unconscious. Even the elder token had been snatched by this old man. The old man walked in front of the kneeling Wei Zhuan and Sassafras, and casually kicked Wei Zhuan to the side. "Go, go, go, don't block the way." Wei Zhuan flew out, screaming miserably. In the elder hall, the 5 elders' expressions were dignified. Wei Shitong narrowed his eyes at the newcomer, Treasurer Meng. The newcomer was the contribution hall's Meng Wu Ya. Speaking of this person, the 5 elders were all confused. More than 10 years ago, he suddenly came to High Heaven Pavilion. They did not know what relationship he had with the sect master, but he lived in the pavilion and took charge of the contribution hall. The elders had asked the sect master many times about this person, but every time the sect master did not give them any details, leaving them scratching their heads. However, the 5 elders knew that this person was an expert. Moreover, he was definitely not inferior to them. Fortunately, this person did not have any purpose and only spent his time in the contribution hall, so the elders did not pay any attention to him. But he did not expect that he would come to the elder hall uninvited today. Wei Shitong faintly felt that when facing this Treasurer Meng, the pressure was even greater than when facing the sect master. Because of this, Wei Shitong did not dare to slight Treasurer Meng. Wei Shitong smiled and said, "I don't know why Treasurer Meng has come to my elder hall. What business do you have?" Meng Wu Ya did not answer and only smiled at Su Xianwu. Su Xianwu did not understand why he was being stared at. He thought to himself, "There are no flowers on my face, so why are you looking at me? Do you think your decision is correct?" Meng Wu Ya suddenly asked. "What?" Su Xianwu was surprised. Chapter 76. "That's right." Su Xianwu sneered. Why was Wei Zhuan wearing a defensive artifact when he was sparring with Sassafras? Isn't this breaking the rules of the sect? How should we deal with this? He didn't say how to deal with Yang Kai, but first tied Wei Zhuan together. This made the first elder's expression blank, not knowing how to answer. If Wei Zhuan really used his own ability to beat Sassafras, then Sassafras can only blame himself for not being skilled enough. Now that Wei Zhuan is using a defensive artifact to humiliate my grandson, brother, do you think I'm made of mud? Su Xianwu shouted angrily and slapped the armrest of his chair into pieces. Wei Shitong had no choice but to lower his attitude and say, "Second junior brother, please calm down. Wei Zhuan's defensive artifact was indeed bestowed upon him by me. But I only wanted to give him a little more protection. Who would have thought that this child would be so bad and use a defensive artifact to spar with others? This is Wei Zhuan's fault." After saying this, he shouted angrily, "Wei Zhuan, why haven't you apologized to your junior brother yet?" Wei Zhuan was very obedient and immediately cupped his fists towards Sassafras. "Junior brother, this time it was brother Wei's fault. Brother will apologize to you. Junior brother, please be magnanimous and don't take offense." Humph. Sassafras turned his head away and ignored him. But what could Su Xianwu do now that things had come to this? The first elder said again, "Wei Zhuan is wrong, But Yang Kai's mistake is even worse. Holding a divine weapon, he almost killed Wei Zhuan. If it weren't for the intervention of the disciplinary hall disciples, Wei Zhuan would have already lost his life. This matter has a bad influence and Yang Kai must be severely punished as a warning to others. Fourth elder Zhu Fei and fifth elder Yu Zizai nodded in agreement. Second elder sneered, "Why is it that Wei Zhuan broke the sect's rules and just apologized, but Yang Kai has to be severely punished? Could it be that because Wei Zhuan is eldest brother's grandson, he can enjoy some privileges? If that's the case, then what prestige does Sky Tower's elder have in front of the disciples?" Wei Shitong sternly said, "Second martial brother's words are incorrect. Kai Yang's mistakes and Wei Zhuan's mistakes could not be compared. Wei Zhuan was only wearing a defensive artifact to protect himself, he didn't want to harm. Zhuan's is to protect others, while Yang's is killing, his killing people. Who is more important? Second junior brother should be clear." "Brother." Xian Wu said, "Wu's right." "Who?" "If he really had such a weapon, why didn't the Law Enforcement Hall find it on him?" "Fourth brother, did the Law Enforcement Hall under your command report on this?" Fourth elder Zhu Fei was in charge of the disciplinary hall. He shook his head and said, "Although they didn't, there were so many people present at the time. They all saw Yang Kai holding a blood-red knife. This matter can't be faked. If it wasn't for the power of that weapon, Wei Zhuan's embroidered cloud chainmail wouldn't have been destroyed." Su Xian Wu snorted. The yuan qi in his body revolved, and a slender long sword suddenly burst out from his fingertips. This long sword was formed by the yuan qi. It flickered and was obviously very powerful. "If that's the case, does that mean I'm also holding a weapon?" Su Xian Wu looked coldly at the three people in front of him. "This is only the exquisite use of yuan qi. How can it be considered a weapon?" Fifth elder Yu Zizai slowly shook his head. "Second brother, do you mean that Yang Kai, who is only at the initial element third level, can already use yuan qi to such an extent?" Fourth elder Zhu Fei looked at Su Xian Wu with a faint smile. This was a joke. A cultivator could only condense such a substance when his strength reached the yuan qi level and the yuan qi in his body turned into yuan qi. Yang Kai was only at the initial element third level. He was thousands of miles away from the yuan qi level. How could he have such ability? I didn't say that he could control yuan qi to such an extent. But brothers, did you forget about martial arts? Su Xian Wu snorted. Impossible. Even if he used some strange martial arts, a mere initial element third level cultivator would never be able to break through the defense of the embroidered cloud chainmail. Wei Shitong shook his head repeatedly. "There is nothing impossible in this world. I can only say that brothers have been in Sky Tower for a long time and are obsessed with fighting for power. Your thinking is too rigid and can't keep up with the times." These words were unpleasant to hear. Wei Shitong's face suddenly turned cold. "Second junior brother, do you really have to protect that Yang Kai? So what if I do?" Su Xian Wu suddenly stood up. "This matter, to put it simply, is a competition between the younger generation. Why do you have to make a fuss about it? Fine, I'll satisfy your unreasonable demands. Either we punish both Yang Kai and Wei Zhuang. They both broke the rules of the Sky Tower, so we won't let either one of them go. Or, this matter will end here." "No." Wei Shitong flatly refused. "Even if it is as you said, that Yang Kai used martial arts to break through the defense of the embroidered cloud chainmail, this person is still young and his methods are bloody and cruel. In the future, when his cultivation reaches a certain level, he will definitely fall into the evil path. Our Sky Tower cannot tolerate such a person. He is only in the initial element stage. How do you know that he will fall into the evil path in the future? Big brother, do you have the ability to predict the future?" "Second brother." Fourth elder Zhu Fei was about to speak, but was interrupted by Su Xian Wu's angry shout. Su Xian Wu pointed at his nose and scolded, "Fourth brother, before the head went into seclusion, he appointed you to be in charge of the Law Enforcement Hall. These past few years, have you seen what the Law Enforcement Hall has done? Where is fairness and justice? If the Law Enforcement Hall only suppresses dissidents and helps people fight for power, Then what is the use of keeping it? Tomorrow, I will report to the head and have him remove the law enforcement hall. Fuck, what is this? The fourth elder was scolded, but he couldn't refute, so his heart was filled with grievances. Second junior brother, what if I insist on expelling Yang Kai from Sky Tower? Wei Shi Tong asked with a cold face. You dare. Su Xianwu did not back down. Good, then we will follow the rules set by the head and vote by a show of hands. Once the elder council passes, I think second junior brother won't have any objections, right? Haha, a show of hands. Su Xianwu laughed. Big brother, do you think I, Su Xianwu, am a fool? A show of hands, is there a need to vote? This won't do, that won't do, what do you want? Are you not even paying attention to the rules set by the head? Wei Shi Tong also became angry. The elder hall was filled with smoke, and it seemed that a fight was about to break out. Calm down, calm down. Come drink a cup of water, everyone calm down. The third elder, who had not spoken until now, tried to persuade them. The third elder had a calm temperament, and although he stood on the second elder's side, he generally did not participate in any fights. Moreover, his name was the same as his catchphrase, he chue shui, drink a cup of water. Whenever there was any friction between the elders, he would try to persuade them, but the results were very little. We won't drink. The great elder and second elder roared at the same time, glaring at each other, neither willing to accept the other. The third elder was helpless and could only drink by himself. While the elders were arguing, a person's voice suddenly came from outside. This disciple has an important matter to report to the several elders. The fourth elder frowned and quickly said, Come in. When the elder council was discussing something, ordinary disciples did not dare to disturb them. For someone to come at this time, it was certain that something big had happened in the sect. The few elders knew the situation and naturally stopped their quarrel. After the disciple came in, fourth elder Ju Fei asked, What is it? Reporting to the elders, someone broke into the law enforcement hall's forest prison and rescued the troublemakers Yang Kai and Li Yuntian. At the moment, they are confronting brother Xie Hong Chen at the entrance of the prison. What? The fourth elder stood up on the spot, and the other elders were even more shocked. Who is so bold, daring to break into the forest prison to rescue people? The High Heaven Pavilion disciple didn't dare answer, only raising his eyes to look at Su Xianwu. Su Xianwu's heart skipped a beat, faintly having a bad premonition. The great elder took in all of this and more or less had a guess, so he calmly ordered, Speak. It's Su Yang, senior sister Su. As soon as these words came out, the smile on the great elder's face suddenly became meaningful, and even the fourth and fifth elders gave Su Xianwu a strange look, while the third elder continued to drink his water. Su Xianwu's expression changed, gnashing his teeth in anger as he shouted, Did you see clearly? Was the person who broke into the forest prison really Su Yang? The disciplinary hall disciple trembled in fear and quickly said, Disciple saw it clearly. I know senior sister Su Yang's name. If second elder doesn't believe me, you can go and see for yourself. No need. Su Xianwu waved his hand, closed his eyes, and a moment later, he really did feel a chill coming from the forest prison. This kind of chill, in all of High Heaven Pavilion, except for Su Yang, no one else could have. This little girl really doesn't know what's important, she's too bold. Second junior brother, what do you think of this matter? The great elder smiled as he sipped his tea, waiting for Su Xianwu to withdraw his divine sense before calmly asking. At this moment, the great elder was confident. If the two sides were unwilling to back down just now, then there was now a breakthrough. What kind of place was the forest prison? It was an important place where High Heaven Pavilion imprisoned disciples who had committed crimes. Whether Yang Kai was in the wrong or not, as long as he was imprisoned, he had to stay there before the matter was settled. Now, Su Yang had rushed in and pulled him out. She had shown a moment of bravery, but had violated High Heaven Pavilion's rules. This was a big mistake. If it wasn't handled properly, even Su Yang would be punished. Wei Shi Tong knew that Su Xianwu definitely wouldn't let Su Yang be implicated, so he had to make a concession. Naturally, the one who was willing to let go was that disciple named Yang Kai. Speaking of which, None of the 5 elders knew who Kai Yang was. The main reason why they had made such a big fuss about him was because they wanted to seize control of the High Heaven Pavilion. But now, the great elder felt that he could win. After this matter spread, the disciples below would naturally think that the great elder's faction could influence High Heaven Pavilion's decisions and movements. Thus, their goal would be achieved. Su Xianwu's face was livid, and after struggling for a long time, he angrily said, "Whatever eldest brother wants to do, we'll do it." Su Yang had become a hindrance, so how could Su Xianwu be in the mood to continue arguing with them? In order to protect Su Yang from being punished, Yang Kai could only be sacrificed. Where there is life, there is hope. In the future, there will always be a chance to get back at him, old ghost. Sassafras heard this and immediately stared at Su Xianwu in disbelief. "What did you call me?" Su Xianwu was about to go crazy with anger at this pair of siblings. "Grandfather, you can't do this." Sassafras quickly changed his words. "You have no right to speak in this matter." Su Xianwu glared at him fiercely. "Brother Yang saved my life, you can't just ignore him. If you don't, then you're being ungrateful. You shut up." Su Xianwu's face turned red. Although he was unwilling in his heart, he was currently on the chopping block, so what could he do? In order to prevent Sassafras from continuing, Su Xianwu sent out a finger, causing Sassafras to freeze like a statue, unable to speak or move, only able to watch and listen. "I'll deal with you when we get back." Su Xianwu snorted. "Haha." The great elder smiled with satisfaction. Since second junior brother has no objections, then this matter is decided. Finished speaking, he looked at the disciples below and said, "Pass down the order. Trial disciple Yang Kai has repeatedly violated the sect's rules. His methods are bloody and cruel, so the disciplinary hall will arrest him and bring him back to the forest prison. After the elders discuss, we will deal with him." As for Su Yang, seeing that she is young and ignorant, and that this is her first offense, we will not pursue this matter. Junior brothers, what do you think? How could the other elders have any objections? Go. The great elder waved his hand and a token flew out, landing in the disciple's hand. The elder's order, seeing the token is the same as seeing the person. With this token, Su Yang did not dare to act rashly. Yes. The disciplinary hall disciple received the order and quickly retreated. A moment later, a short scream suddenly came from the door, followed by the sound of a person falling to the ground. The elders' expressions changed, and just as they were about to get up to investigate, a voice came from outside. "Elders, you are quite awe-inspiring." The voice sounded, and a white-haired old man slowly walked in. In his hand was the disciplinary hall disciple who had just left, but now he had been knocked unconscious. Even the elder's token had been snatched by this old man. This old man walked in front of the kneeling Wei Zhuan and Sassafras, and casually kicked Wei Zhuan to the side. "Go go go, don't block the way." Wei Zhuan flew out, screaming miserably. In the elders' hall, the 5 elders' expressions were dignified. Wei Shitong narrowed his eyes at the newcomer, Treasurer Meng. The newcomer was the contribution hall's Meng Wu Ya. Speaking of this person, the 5 elders were all confused. More than 10 years ago, he suddenly came to High Heaven Pavilion. They did not know what relationship he had with the sect master, but he lived in the pavilion and managed the contribution hall. The elders had asked the sect master many times about this person, but every time the sect master did not give them any details, leaving them scratching their heads. However, the 5 elders knew that this person was an expert. Moreover, he was definitely not inferior to them. Fortunately, this person did not have any purpose and only spent his time in the contribution hall, so the elders did not pay attention to him. But he did not expect that he would come to the elder hall uninvited today. Wei Shitong faintly felt that when facing this Treasurer Meng, the pressure was even greater than when facing the sect master. Because of this, Wei Shitong did not dare to slight Treasurer Meng. Smiling, Wei Shitong opened his mouth. "I wonder why Treasurer Meng has come to my elder's hall?" Meng Wu Ya did not answer and only smiled at Su Xianwu. Su Xianwu was puzzled by this stare, but he thought to himself, "There are no flowers on my face, so why are you looking at me? Do you think your decision is correct?" Meng Wu Ya suddenly asked. "What?" Su Xianwu was surprised. Chapter 77. Sacrificing young Kai to protect Su Yang. Do you really think you're doing the right thing? Treasurer Meng chuckled. Su Xianwu's expression became awkward. He thought the other party was here to criticize him. Meng Wu Ye continued, this way, you can indeed protect Su Yang. But, if Su Yang were to find out afterwards, how would she feel? Su Xianwu's expression froze, sweat dripping down his forehead as he suddenly realized the seriousness of the situation. If you really do this, you will only create a heart demon for Su Yang. She cultivates the ice heart secret art. Once a heart demon is born, you know the consequences better than anyone. Meng Wu Ye's faint voice sounded in Su Xianwu's ears, causing the latter to feel like he had been struck by lightning and regret. He had only cared about the immediate benefits and hadn't thought about what kind of terrible consequences he would bring to Su Yang in the future. Indeed, sacrificing young Kai this time could indeed protect Su Yang, but as long as she lived, she would definitely remember this matter and think that the reason she was safe was all because of young Kai's sacrifice. If this continued, her heart would definitely be tormented and her state of mind would become unstable, so how could her strength improve? Many thanks for Treasurer Meng's reminder, Su Xianwu respectfully said. Ha. Meng Wu Ye chuckled, even if I didn't say anything, you would have guessed, it's just a matter of time. Great Elder stood to the side with a gloomy expression. He had finally found an opportunity to defeat his second junior brother, but now that Treasurer Meng had appeared and lectured him, how could his second junior brother be willing to be manipulated by him? For Su Yang's future, he would definitely not compromise this time. Realizing this, Wei Shitong said with a gloomy expression, Treasurer Meng, this is High Heaven Pavilion's Elder Hall. Without the permission of an elder, no one is allowed to set foot here. You should return to where you came from. Meng Wu Ye glanced at him and threw the elder's token back to him. His figure flashed and he arrived at the highest position in the Elder Hall. Bold. Wei Shitong flew into a rage, and the other elders also looked at Treasurer Meng with a fierce expression. The reason was none other than that empty seat was reserved for the High Heaven Pavilion's sect master. Besides the sect master, no one else was qualified to set foot there. The few elders had been fighting openly and secretly for so many years. Even the great elder did not dare to covet that position. But now, an unknown contribution hall shopkeeper was actually standing in the main seat. How could the elders not be angry? This was contempt for the entire High Heaven Pavilion. He, please calm down. Meng Wu Ye smiled faintly and stroked his beard. I'm here on behalf of your sect leader to pass on a message. You're here on behalf of the sect master? The 5 elders were visibly moved. Over the past 10 years, even the 5 great elders had found it extremely difficult to see the sect leader. Who would have thought that Meng Wu Ye would actually go and see him? And from what he said, it seemed that the sect leader had something to say about what happened today. What was going on here? Normally, even if the pavilion was in chaos, the sect leader would not intervene. So how could today's conflict between a group of juniors have alarmed the sect leader? What is this? Do you recognize it? Meng Wu Ye held a purple jade pendant in his hand. The sect leader's jade pendant. This jade pendant was the symbol of High Heaven Pavilion's sect leader. It was absolutely impossible to fake. It's good that you know. Meng Wu Ye smiled. Wei Shitong carefully asked, dare I ask Treasurer Meng, what instructions does the sect leader have for us? Although the sect leader had not been involved in High Heaven Pavilion's affairs for more than 10 years, his prestige as a pavilion master had never weakened. Meng Wu Ye said, your sect leader said that today's matter should be reduced to a small matter, and then reduced to nothing. This is a fight between juniors, so why are you shameless old men interfering? Don't be too shameless. Wei Shitong was stunned and stammered, sect leader. Sect leader said that? Oh, the last part was my words. Your sect leader only said the first half. Meng Wu Ye lightly said. The 5 elders almost vomited blood in anger. This scolding was really strong. Unfortunately, they did not know how to respond. Also, since young Kai has already reached the initial element stage, then let him be promoted to an ordinary disciple. He can't always carry the status of a trial disciple. These words were also said by you? Wei Shitong asked with some worry. It was your sect leader who said it. Meng Wu Ye chuckled. The words have been passed on. You can do as you see fit. Finished speaking, he directly walked down from above and strode out of the elder hall. The 5 elders looked at each other and remained silent. Since the sect leader had already passed on the message, what else was there to discuss? It was not a big deal to begin with. Everyone was just using this as a pretext to make a fuss. Wouldn't it be easy to resolve it? Su Xianwu coldly harumphed. He flicked his sleeves and left. With the sect leader's orders, there was no need for him to fight anymore. He walked up to the palace, grabbed Su Mu, and disappeared. The 2nd elder left, and the 3rd elder Hebei Shui also left. Only the great elder's faction was left in the hall. The 5th elder, Yu Zizai, said, "Big brother, something is wrong. Today's matter is not a big deal, but it actually alarmed the sect leader. Is there some mystery behind it?" The 4th elder also nodded. Could it be that the sect leader wants to take this opportunity to tell us that he is still watching Sky Tower? This was also the great elder's guess, but he did not dare to admit it. Now that the 4th elder said it out loud, his heart also thumped. No matter what, this time we will take a step back. In the future, we will have to be more careful. The great elder muttered, however, we can test the sect master's thoughts and see what he is thinking. If he is willing to leave the mountain and take charge of High Heaven Pavilion, then we will support him, but if he is only acting on a whim, High Heaven Pavilion cannot continue like this. We should have someone who can take charge of it. Yes. But how should we test him? The 4th elder asked softly. Didn't the sect leader say that he would promote Yang Kai to an ordinary disciple? We can also do something about it. So that's how it is. The 4th elder and the 5th elder suddenly realized. In front of the forest prison, Su Yang and Xie Hongchen were confronting each other. No one dared to move. This situation had lasted for half an hour. Su Yang's body was becoming colder and colder. If it were not for Yang Kai's secret art restraining Su Yang's ice heart secret art, he would have already been frozen into an ice sculpture. While they were in a deadlock, a disciple of the law enforcement hall hurried over and shouted, "The Elder Council has ordered, release them." What? Xie Hongchen heard this and was stunned. The law enforcement hall disciple bitterly said, "Brother Xie, the several elders have said that today's matter ends here. No one is to pursue this matter further, otherwise the sect will punish them." Xie Hongchen glared at Yang Kai with resentment. He had been waiting for Su Yang to make a move, because as long as Su Yang made a move, he could find an opportunity to kill Yang Kai, but Su Yang did not give him this opportunity. Now that he heard the Elder Council's order, he naturally knew that there was no hope. Gnashing his teeth in grief and indignation, Xie Hongchen roared, "Release them." Su Yang still supported Yang Kai and led Li Yuntian and the others forward, her expression as calm as an ancient well. Under the complicated gaze of Xie Hongchen, she slowly left. Chapter 78. The lively battle between the younger generation of disciples had come to an end in such a strange manner. Many people felt that it was completely inexplicable. This battle involved a lot of people. The disciplinary hall sent out hundreds of disciples just to stop Su Yang, which also proved her strength. The other main character of this incident, Yang Kai, was also known by many disciples. There were those who disdained him, those who envied him, and all kinds of comments. At this moment, Yang Kai was sleeping. After leaving the forest prison, Yang Kai fell asleep directly. This time, he was beaten up by 5 disciplinary hall disciples. Although the injuries he suffered were not fatal, they were quite serious. If not for the anger in his heart, Yang Kai would have collapsed long ago. Once the matter was settled, there was no more worry in his heart. Naturally, he could not hold on anymore. When he woke up, Kai Yang was surprised to find himself lying on an unfamiliar bed. His whole body was sore. Looking around, he found that this room was very simple and elegant. There wasn't much furniture in the room, it was very quiet and secluded. It was just like Su Yang's house in Black Wind Trade. He struggled to get up. Maybe the noise he made was heard outside. Not long after, Sassafras opened the door and appeared with a touched face. Li Yuntian and the others were all there. They followed Sassafras in and looked at Yang Kai with relief. "Brother Yang, how do you feel?" Sassafras came forward and helped him up. "I'm fine." Yang Kai slightly operated his Yuan Qi and found that there was no big problem. He just needed to rest for a few days. "Brother saved me again this time." "Sassafras, thank you." Sassafras thanked him clumsily. "Don't worry about it." Yang Kai waved his hand. "Oh right, these are the pills my old man gave you. These are all for healing and cultivation." Sassafras took out a dozen bottles and placed them on the bed. "Second elder?" Yang Kai was stunned. "Isn't this too much?" Not much. You were seriously injured this time. You should take care of yourself. Junior brother, please thank the second elder on my behalf." "There's no need to thank him." Sassafras waved his hand, a hint of anger appearing on his face. Su Xianwu also felt that he owed Yang Kai, so he gave him so many pills. After all, if it wasn't for Treasurer Meng bringing the sect master's orders at the last moment, Yang Kai might have been sacrificed by him. Sassafras was infuriated by the way he had handled the situation. This time, he asked for a lot of pills for Yang Kai. "Where's senior sister Su Yang?" Yang Kai looked around and asked. Sassafras's expression suddenly became strange. He had naturally heard about Yang Kai's feats from Li Yuntian and the others, and for a moment, his heart was filled with both fear and admiration. Ever since he was young, the feeling Su Yang gave him was not that of an older sister, but more like a mother. In front of Su Yang, Sassafras never dared to breathe loudly. But look at this senior brother Yang, how bold he is. He actually held his sister's hand in front of hundreds of people, and even said such bold words. After that, he was not killed by his sister. Not only was he not killed, but his sister even arranged for him to recuperate in her own room. This kind of thing was simply unimaginable. In the 2 days that Yang Kai was unconscious, Sassafras had also been thinking hard for 2 days, but he still couldn't figure out the mystery. Why? Why was this so? Brother Yang. Sassafras sighed heavily and patted Yang Kai's shoulder. After a while, he said, "My condolences. Since ancient times, falling flowers have always been heartless. Brother, you need to be more open-minded." Yang Kai stared blankly for a moment, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He knew that Sassafras had misunderstood him, but he didn't explain and just asked, "Where is she?" This time, it was all thanks to her rescue at the critical moment. Otherwise, Yang Kai might have really used his Yang liquid to kill those disciplinary hall disciples. But facing those people, Yang Kai didn't have the confidence to kill them, so he didn't take the risk. But no matter what, once it came to that point, there was no turning back. "After she settled you here, she went to Black Wind Trade." Sassafras replied. "Senior sister didn't say anything when she left." Yang Kai was suspicious. Originally, he thought that Su Yang must have something to say to him. After all, his actions at that time were really thoughtless. "No." Sassafras slowly shook his head. Yang Kai secretly admired her. This senior sister's personality was really free and easy. When it came to her reputation, she didn't explain the twists and turns to anyone. The truth was clear. After chatting with Sassafras for a while, he left. Lying on the bed, Yang Kai didn't think too much about it. Things had already come to this, so there was no point in thinking about it. It just so happened that Sassafras had brought a lot of pills, so it was time to test whether his conjecture was correct or not. Half of these pills were for healing, while the other half were for cultivation. Overall, their value was definitely not cheap. Yang Kai first took a few healing pills, then silently circulated his true Yang secret art, helping the medicinal efficacies dissolve in his body while carefully feeling the changes in his body. Needless to say, the medicinal efficacies of these healing pills were quite remarkable. The medicinal efficacies flowed through his meridians, and in a short time, began to nourish and repair his wounds, reducing the pain in his wounds. However, Yang Kai was keenly aware that a part of the medicinal efficacies of these pills was actually circulating in his meridians and pouring into his bones. Perceiving this point, Yang Kai raised his eyebrows, becoming more and more certain of his conjecture. In order to verify whether this conjecture was correct, Yang Kai continued to eat all kinds of pills throughout the day. The final result showed that his unyielding golden skeleton could indeed absorb other types of energy that was not of the yang attribute. As early as a few days ago when he broke through to the initial element realm, Yang Kai had this conjecture, but at that time there was no way to verify it. The true yang secret art was undoubtedly a special and powerful secret art. It allowed him to condense yang liquid without limit, and yang liquid was also very lethal in battle. However, this powerful secret technique had an obvious limitation, and that was that the cultivation environment was too harsh. It was necessary to cultivate in yang qi environment. Originally, Yang Kai was worried that his cultivation would be affected by the environment, but now the unyielding golden skeleton's tolerance allowed him to eliminate this worry. When there was yang qi, he could cultivate the true yang secret art, but when there was no yang qi, there was no harm. The unyielding golden skeleton was not picky about its food, and would accept any kind of energy. Under this two-pronged approach, his strength would not stop because of a lack of yang attribute energy. This non-yang attribute energy would be absorbed by the unyielding golden skeleton, and when it was time to fight, it would be fed back to him, increasing his fighting strength. Yang Kai faintly felt that there was an unclear relationship between his unyielding golden skeleton and the true yang secret art, but as for what kind of relationship it was, he couldn't figure it out. When Yang Kai came back to his senses, he couldn't help but be shocked. He had unknowingly consumed a total of 5 bottles of pills, and each bottle contained 10 pills, in other words, he had eaten 50 pills. Even if these pills were only ordinary level pills, and their quality was not high, but if an ordinary person ate so many, their body would definitely not be able to withstand it. But right now, he was completely fine, and his injuries were much better. In the darkness, Yang Kai's 2 eyes flashed with a terrifying light, staring at the remaining 7 or 8 bottles of various pills, his heart surging with a crazy idea. Once this idea came out, he couldn't suppress it. After a long silence, Yang Kai finally decided to take a gamble. Reaching out, he picked up a bottle of pills, opened the lid, and poured it all into his mouth, regardless of whether it was a healing pill or a cultivation pill. Picking up another bottle, he poured it into his mouth. After swallowing all of the remaining pills, Yang Kai licked his lips in satisfaction. If others were to see this scene, they would be scared to the point of peeing their pant. Indeed, none of these pills were poisonous, but they couldn't be swallowed as if they were peas. It must be known that every medicine was 30% poisonous, and any kind of pill had a bottom line. Going too far was as bad as going too far. Not only would it not be good for the body, it would also endanger one's health, and even affect one's cultivation base and foundation. But in that short period of time, Kai Yang had swallowed 70 to 80 different pills in one go. Smacking his lips, Yang Kai felt his stomach bulging. Countless weak and gentle medicinal powers mixed in his stomach, and not long after, they converged into a frightening energy. Yang Kai was already prepared, and hurriedly circulated the true yang secret art. The energy was like a dragon that had broken out of its cage, churning in his stomach. Yang Kai groaned, feeling as if his entire abdomen was being torn apart. The speed of the true yang secret art circulation suddenly increased a lot, as if it had an endless attractive force. The energy condensed from the 70 to 80 pills was pulled by this attractive force, slowly merging into his meridians. Yang Kai didn't dare to relax in the slightest, and used his heart to feel. This dragon-like energy was moving in his meridians, but it was incompatible with the true yang yuan qi. Although the two were mixed with each other, they simply wouldn't merge. Not only that, but the direction in which these two kinds of energy flowed in his meridians was also completely different. The true yang yuan qi circulated clockwise, while this huge medicinal effect circulated counterclockwise, colliding with each other endlessly. Every time they collided, the true yang yuan qi would burn away the harmful substances in the medicinal effect, leaving behind the pure energy. Yang Kai's body flickered, and his skin turned red in an instant. Under his skin, Every meridian seemed to be crawling with insects, swelling endlessly, looking very frightening. With the passage of time, the impurities in this huge amount of energy were removed, and little by little it entered his bones. At this moment, the unyielding golden skeleton seemed to have turned into a hungry fountain, swallowing large mouthfuls of energy. Under the severe pain, Yang Kai's senses were clearer than ever. It was as if his body had a pair of eyes. He could see how the true Yang Yuan Qi refined this energy, and he could also see how the unyielding golden skeleton received this refined energy, not missing a single trace. Faintly, Yang Kai recalled the several battles he had experienced after obtaining the unyielding golden skeleton. Blood splattered everywhere, and his body was in pain, but he was excited and bloodthirsty. Every time, accompanied by pain and an unyielding will, his strength would rapidly increase, and he would be able to defeat and behead opponents who were stronger than him. Especially the battle 2 days ago in the forest prison, where he was beaten up by 5 opponents who were far more powerful than him. Every scene was clearly presented in his mind. His blood began to boil once again, and his bones began to produce a familiar warmth. The energy that had been swallowed up by the unyielding golden skeleton was now being fed back to him, temporarily increasing his strength. Still not enough. Yang Kai felt that he was still missing something before he could truly comprehend the mysteries of the unyielding golden skeleton. I'm still missing a real battle. Thinking of this, Yang Kai suddenly jumped out of bed, gasping for breath as he pushed open the door. Looking left and right, he walked straight to the opposite room and kicked it open. Yang Kai estimated that Sassafras should be sleeping in the opposite room because he had heard some movement not long ago. If he wanted to find someone to fight, Sassafras would be a good candidate. Opening the door, Yang Kai immediately saw a smooth back. Just as he was about to blurt out a challenge, he swallowed it back down. Under the moonlight, by the windowsill, a graceful and delicate figure tugged at his heartstrings. White and smooth skin. Looking back, he could see thousands of people shaking. This scene was truly thrilling, and Yang Kai's 3 souls and 7 spirits almost flew out of his body. There was indeed someone in this room, but it wasn't Sassafras as Yang Kai had imagined, but it was Su Yang. Chapter 79. At this moment, Su Yang was only wearing a corset and panties. Her back was as white as jade, her buttocks were round, and her long and slender legs were exposed to the air. Large patches of snow-white skin were unreservedly imprinted in Yang Kai's eyes. Even though it was night time, Kai Yang could still see it clearly. The curve of her back was so perfect. Her slender shoulders exuded an alluring luster, and her slender waist was exquisite and graceful. It set off her moderately sized buttocks, and her sparkling and translucent skin made people's blood boil. The tight little panties around her buttocks were even more enticing. Because her skin was very white, and because her corset and panties were white, at first glance, one would think that she was completely naked. Perhaps because she heard the movement behind her, she crossed one hand in front of her chest, half of her body looking towards the door, while the other hand was holding a white nightgown. It seemed that she was in the middle of changing her clothes. The 2 people's eyes met in midair. Yang Kai's expression was stunned, and his gaze lingered on her full breasts. Su Yang's beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of murderous intent, and her shoulders trembled slightly. Because she saw 2 bloodshot eyes. These eyeballs were like a vicious wolf searching for food in the snow, or like a hungry ghost wandering around her pure and clean body without the slightest scruple. Not only that, but the man opposite her was also panting heavily, as if he was restless. Catcher. With Su Yang as the center, a layer of frost quickly spread around her. Her dark red lips pursed, and her eyes were cold. Yang Kai finally realized that the situation was bad. His body turned, and his speed increased to the limit, quickly escaping the scene. His speed was very fast, and in less than 3 breaths of time, he had rushed out of the house. But before he could distinguish between north and south, a loud noise suddenly came from behind him. A large hole was broken open in the house, and a pure white figure flew out from inside, landing on Yang Kai's face. Her expression was cold, but there was also a trace of shame and anger. Yang Kai vigilantly retreated a few steps, and put on a defensive posture. His mind raced, thinking about how to explain. But when he thought about it carefully, he knew that there was nothing he could say to defend himself. No matter what he said, it would be useless. No matter which girl had her body seen like this, she would not let it go easily. At this moment, Su Yang had already put on her clothes. She coldly stared at Yang Kai. Although she was so angry that she wanted to kill him, she knew that Yang Kai didn't do it on purpose. He probably didn't expect that she would return from Black Wind Trade and live in the room opposite his. This could only be said to be a misunderstanding, but even if it was a misunderstanding, Su Yang couldn't let it go so easily. She was waiting for an explanation that would calm her anger. However, the man who had seen her body didn't say a word. His eyes were still red, and a strong fighting spirit was emitted from his body. He didn't have the slightest bit of timidity or shame in front of her. Very well, I don't need your explanation. I just want to beat you up to vent my anger. An ice flower quietly appeared on Su Yang's fingertips, and with a flick of her finger, the ice flower spun and flew towards Yang Kai. As it flew, the ice flower began to grow. By the time it reached Yang Kai, the ice flower had already grown to the size of a wash basin, and its speed was extremely fast. Yang Kai didn't dare to be the slightest bit negligent. His true Yang Yuan Qi burst out and punched the ice flower. His fist hurt. The ice flower's ice attribute and the Yang attribute's true Yang Yuan Qi just so happened to counter each other. With this punch, the wash basin-sized ice flower was directly shattered. Asterisk su su su. Asterisk the shattered ice flower turned into countless icicles and shot towards Yang Kai. Yang Kai didn't have time to react. In an instant, more than a dozen wounds appeared on his body, dripping with blood. His body that had not yet fully healed looked even more shaky. Yang Kai roared in a low voice, and his unyielding golden skeleton once again played its role. A warm feeling spread throughout his body, and his strength slowly increased. Su Yang's beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. She had thought that she would be able to knock Yang Kai unconscious with this move, but she had not expected that he would actually be able to resolve it. Her figure flickered, and like a fairy descending from the heavens, Su Yang approached Yang Kai and pointed a finger at Yang Kai's shoulder. A cold feeling spread across his shoulder, causing Yang Kai to stagger back. Turning his head, he couldn't help but squint as he saw a snowy white frost appear on his shoulder. Moreover, this frost seemed to be condensing into an ice flower. Without the slightest hesitation, Yang Kai tore open his clothes and condensed a drop of Yang liquid at his fingertips, directly sprinkling it on his shoulder. With a sizzling sound, Yang Kai's shoulder seemed to have been branded red by a hot iron. In an instant, it became extremely red, but the spreading frost was also quickly reduced by the drop of Yang liquid, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Su Yang was even more surprised. She had never thought that Yang Kai would be able to use such an incredible method to resolve her cold ice strength. Her beautiful eyes filled with frost, Su Yang directly rolled up 1,000 layers of snow, her graceful body hidden in this wave of snow, directly rolling towards Yang Kai. Like the power of an avalanche, the momentum was tremendous, and Yang Kai was instantly wrapped in the wave of snow. A piercing chill rose from the bottom of his heart. Even though he cultivated the true Yang secret art, at this moment, Yang Kai had the illusion that he was about to be frozen into an ice sculpture. He knew that senior sister Su Yang was angry. Although there was no murderous intent in her moves, it was clear that she wanted to teach him a lesson. This situation was exactly what Yang Kai had intended. Although his opponent was unreachable and he was unable to resist, he could use her to comprehend what he had just learned. This opponent was 1,000 times better than Sassafras. Inside the wave of snow, Su Yang repeatedly attacked Yang Kai, but he was unable to resolve it. A series of muffled groans rang out as blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. His body trembled as he struggled to resist the invasion of the cold. In this adversity, Yang Kai's feelings became clearer and clearer, and he suddenly gave up resisting, allowing Su Yang to attack him. What's wrong? What's wrong? The commotion had finally disturbed those who were sleeping soundly. Second Elder Su Xian Wu was the first to rush to the scene, followed by Sassafras, Li Yuntian, and the others. When they saw the situation, Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. In the midst of the snowstorm, Yang Kai's upper body was bare, his eyes closed as he withstood Su Yang's fierce attacks. His seemingly thin body was like a ragged sack, being hit here and there by Su Yang, flying through the air but unable to land. Sigh. Sassafras sucked in a breath of cold air. How did brother Yang provoke elder sister? Is senior sister taking revenge for what happened a few days ago? Li Yun Tian was horrified. That must be it, otherwise, with senior sister's temperament, how could she beat brother Yang like this? Poor brother Yang, his injuries haven't even healed yet he's met with such a disaster. Senior sister is too ruthless. The whispers of this group of people entered Su Yang's ears, which made her even angrier. Today, it was because Kai Yang had seen her body that she had decided to teach him a lesson. But from these people's mouths, it was as if she was the one with a small heart and a chicken's intestines. Su Yang's attacks became even more ruthless. Chapter 80. Su Xianwu squinted his eyes as he stared at the beaten Yang Kai, asking curiously, he seems to be comprehending something. What do you mean? Sassafras couldn't understand. Su Xianwu slowly shook his head and didn't explain. In his eyes, although Yang Kai's current situation was tragic, it was obvious that he was using this battle to comprehend something. Perhaps it was a kind of state of mind, or perhaps it was a martial skill. Wrapped in the cold air, Yang Kai's shivering body seemed to emit a blazing flame. Once this flame ignited, he would be reborn and enter a new level. If he could succeed, his future achievements would be extraordinary. Su Xianwu had never seen a cultivator who could enter such a deep level of comprehension when their strength was so low. It was simply a miracle. Grandfather, if elder sister continues to beat him like this, I'm afraid brother Yang will die. Sassafras said anxiously. Su Xianwu shook his head. Yang knows how to control her strength. There is no killing intent in her moves. She is not trying to take Yang Kai's life. Saying so, he muttered to himself, strange. Why would Yang hit him? Even with Su Xianwu's age, he couldn't imagine what had happened just now to make Su Yang so angry. The snowstorm receded as Su Yang's body floated in the air while Yang Kai was thrown directly to the ground. His clothes were tattered, and his exposed skin was blue and purple from frostbite. As he neared the ground, Kai Yang suddenly rolled over and landed firmly on the ground. Opening his eyes, he looked up. Under the starfield, Su Yang's white robes fluttered in the wind, like a fairy descending to the world. Behind her, a full moon hung, her robes fluttering in the night wind. His otherworldly and noble temperament gave birth to a sense of humility for no reason. Catcher, with a series of cracking sounds, Yang Kai's entire body was quickly covered in a layer of frost before a huge block of ice wrapped around him. The block of ice had sharp edges and was crystal clear. Through the layer of ice, every strand of Yang Kai's hair could be seen clearly. Even his expression was stiff on his face. Su Yang didn't say anything, only giving Yang Kai a deep look before turning around and returning to the room. The beautiful scene from just now was left in Yang Kai's eyes. Guard him, when the ice breaks, he will succeed. Su Xianwu solemnly instructed Sassafras. Sassafras nervously, sweating. Grandfather, won't brother Yang freeze to death? Xianwu laughed. He won't, this is his good fortune. Saying so, he turned around and left. Only then did Su Mu and a group of people quietly walk forward, surrounding the huge ice block one by one and beating it incessantly. However, this was condensed by Su Yang's ice force, so how could they destroy it? This is bad, brother Yang has not recovered from his injuries, and now he is frozen inside. I'm afraid his little brother will freeze to death. What should we do? As soon as he finished speaking, he was glared at by Sassafras. Didn't you hear what my grandfather said? This is brother Yang's good fortune. Don't move, if you break this ice, you may hurt brother Yang. Let's just stay here and guard. Oh. The group nodded in response. After guarding until 5 o'clock, the block of ice was still motionless. Yang Kai, who was frozen inside, was like a living corpse. His breathing was weak, but his eyes were fixed on the spot where Su Yang disappeared. Sassafras and the others thought about it and decided to leave 2 people here to guard while the others did what they were supposed to do. This situation lasted for 3 full days. In front of a small building, there was a living person sealed inside an ice sculpture. The scene was as strange as it could be. Sassafras and the others did not know how many shifts they had taken, but every time they left 2 people here to guard, there was still no sign of the ice breaking, causing them to be so anxious that the corners of their mouths started to blister. During these 3 days, Yang Kai did not feel the passage of time at all. Although his eyes were always open, he could not see anything. His mind was completely immersed in enlightenment. Feeling the movement of the bones in his body, feeling the warmth brought about by his unyielding willpower, feeling how his strength grew bit by bit after this warmth spread throughout his body. The ice left behind by Su Yang provided him with a very good space to comprehend. The ice force contained in the ice was constantly eroding his body, penetrating his meridians. This kind of ice force was not something that the current Yang Kai could resist, but he was able to resist every time, relying on the wonders of the unyielding golden skeleton. After resisting hundreds and thousands of times, Yang Kai understood the mysteries of the unyielding golden skeleton and understood why it could increase his strength. The small burning fire seed in his body expanded little by little until today. After understanding the mysteries of the unyielding golden skeleton, the fire seed instantly ignited, emitting a monstrous heat wave from his body. Suddenly, a cracking sound rang out. Sassafras and Li Yuntian, who were standing guard at the side, were alarmed by this movement and quickly turned their heads to look. What they saw was that the huge ice cube had actually cracked open one after another, densely packed like a spider's web. "Brother Yang is coming out," Sassafras declared in surprise. Sure enough, as soon as his voice fell, the ice cube exploded, turning into specks of light that disappeared into the air. Yang Kai stood in place, covered in blood. His upper body was still somewhat thin, but his brows were furrowed, as if he was deep in thought. Sassafras and Li Yuntian didn't dare to disturb him, so they quietly waited. After a long while, the worry on Yang Kai's face suddenly disappeared. He smiled and said, "If that's the case, then I'll call you Unyielding Will." Unyielding Will was something that Yang Kai had comprehended in these 3 days. It was a mysterious martial skill that couldn't be used to attack, but could be used to strengthen one's body. This was a martial skill that he had comprehended from the unyielding golden skeleton, and was closely related to the unyielding golden skeleton. Only when he was in adversity and had an unyielding will, could he activate this mysterious martial skill. Once he used it, the unyielding golden skeleton would provide him with energy, temporarily increasing his strength. Although he had unintentionally activated the unyielding will before, but for a martial skill, knowing its principles and not knowing its principles made a huge difference. It could be said that until now, Yang Kai had truly mastered this mysterious martial skill, a martial skill that belonged only to him. It wouldn't be like before, where once he was injured or stimulated, he would involuntarily activate the unyielding will. Although the harvest was huge, Yang Kai was still somewhat unsatisfied. This was because he could feel that the unyielding golden skeleton still hid some other mysteries that he hadn't seen through yet. He had to say that it was a pity. Yang Kai comforted himself. There's still a long way to go, there's no need to rush. Only when Yang Kai started to move did Sassafras and Li Yuntian dare to step forward and ask with concern, "Brother Yang, are you okay?" "Me. Very good." Yang Kai moved his arms and legs, and suddenly found that the injuries he had suffered a few days ago were all healed. "You better put on your clothes, otherwise when sister comes back and sees you, she'll beat you up again." Sassafras was worried. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.